Davis. I'm our COO here at Technology Advancement Center. So excited to have you all here for our second Defend the Airport Critical Infrastructure Collaborative event. Without further ado, I would love to kick our day off. We are thrilled to have our keynote speaker, Dr. Wanda Jones-Heath, Principal Cyber Advisor for the Department of the Air Force. Dr. Jones-Heath, welcome.
I think I have a mobile mic and everything, but good morning. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing for the Department of Air Force. Thank you to the TAC team and the leadership for the invite to kick this off, Defend the Airport 2. So over the last 2 years, I've witnessed a huge shift, a shift in the mindset of what we believe is the right thing to do as it relates to this community. Operational technology has always been left behind. When I first started in this job, I actually called it the left behind community because we focus so much on OT. Now the shift mindset is happening because we realize that the adversary is attacking us every chance they get. We realize also that IT outages is about email. OT outages is about mission. We cannot do our mission without water, without power. Being able to survive a breach in this community is devastating. If we can't recover, if we can't reconstitute our connectivity through our HVAC systems, our suppression fire systems, it can mean that we can't get a bird even out of the hangar. So we realize now, and we see from day in and day out, they are attacking us every chance they get. We understand that when we develop our systems, we're talking about systems that have been developed years and years ago. How do you modernize something that is this big in magnitude? You can't, right? But we have to understand, what does it mean when a breach happens to a HVAC system? What happens when a breach happens to something that is outside of the wire? So if you haven't read the National Cyber Strategy, it's very clear that operational technology is huge. Defense critical infrastructure is huge. And the DOW report to the SecWar, he stood up an entire task force. That's the mindset that I'm talking about have shifted, because we realize that we have to do something. If you're not tracking the effort with SecWar and CISA, the partnerships that they've bridged together to understand what the bases need from our community partners when it comes to utilities, water, and those types of services. Now, last year, I talked about our goals. At the end of the day, it's really about how resilient are our systems. Are we defending our control systems? Those goals have not changed. We want to make sure that we can identify and assess our mission critical OT and infrastructure. Now, what you will see beside each of the goals is my assessment of our progress or lack thereof. I say that we're yellow here because we've started. We've been working on understanding and knowing where our IT and OT infrastructure is, what its current state of that infrastructure, because before, we had no clue what was connected or not connected. I often heard when I went out to bases that, oh, I'm air gapped. I'm not connected to anything. Well, that turned out not to be the truth. So understanding was the big part of identifying, understanding, and assessing. Our investments. I mean, we have come so far when it comes to what we believe is true from an investment standpoint. If you don't invest, it's not a priority. Well, I'm here to tell you that since FY24, we've had a huge influx of dollars that support this community. And I fought 2 years in a row to get a POM. We have a POM now that signals that we are ready to start doing what we need to do to protect and defend our infrastructure appropriately. So that's yellow and green, because you never have enough money when it comes to fixing vulnerabilities in this space. Visibility and censoring capability. This is huge because once you find out where the systems are located, how they're connected to our mission, then we must continuously monitor those. And so we are working with our partners down at 16th Air Force to be able to determine where to place our sensors and how these sensors will provide that data back so that we have complete visibility. Now, it's a long journey. We're starting already. We have a few installations and a few pilots that we've done that help us to do that. And here's where industry can really help. Here's where we need solutions that allow us to now tap into what we need to do from a visibility and censoring capability. And then lastly, our OT ready workforce. We work very, very hard to ensure that we have subject matter experts. And these are not just folks who understand the systems. We have our CE, civil engineering community, we have our security community, and you don't find a lot of times where our CE community understands the security side. So we are trying to make sure that we have a ready workforce that understands both sides of the coin. Are we there yet? No, because you see that yellow red, we're just starting. We're just starting to develop courses. Part of our success is we've already developed 3 courses that's been taught at AFIT right now, but we also want to have a cyber defender course. And so we're ready to do that now, and our first course should be ready in November of this year. It takes a lot of time to put together a course because you want to make sure that they understand the system, they have the security pieces of it, they understand what vulnerabilities look like, and so we're well on our way to be able to do that. I talked a little bit about last year our specific DCWF code 462. The Air Force is leading that effort on behalf of the Department of War, and we are probably about 60 to 90 days of getting that finalized. And so that will be the first of many OT related DCWF codes so that we can track our workforce and see what they're doing, what they need, what type of training they need. So you have to identify who they are, understand their limitations and understanding, and then move forward with the rest of our training approach. OT focused red team. You mentioned the National Guard was going to do a workshop here, and we have been working very hard with our partners over at the 175th at Maryland National Guard to be that red team that really supports what we need from this community. We've had lots of zero trust pilots, understanding how do you apply zero trust principles in this space. Not as easy as you think, but we understand that some things apply and some things don't. The hard part is understanding where do we overlay those principles in as we decide to architect and re-architect some of our systems. We are working hard with Cyber to make sure that we levy the requirement. They take care and monitor and defend our IT networks. They should do the same thing for our OT networks and OT systems. And so they have been very gracious in providing some subject matter experts so that we can partner across the communities to be able to do that. Industry Day, a lot of you guys were here when the Air Force helped sponsor and co-host the Industry Day last year, where we looked at, some of the things that Google was doing, Dominion Power, those big industry partners who have been doing this for years. We want to learn. We don't want to start from ground zero to be able to do that. And then the SecWar DCI task force. If you're not following that, I suggest you go out and look. That is a good indicator of where we're going as a community, as a department, to be able to do that. And that's the partnership with CISA. Our Crocs organization, Darrell Hagley is not here today, but he's our senior leader that is leading the charge, and we just realigned that. When you have an organization that you're trying to make a priority, you can't bury it in layers of an organization. So we were able to get that moved into a better fit, still within the A4 community, but the significance is it is now recognized as a separate entity. They have their own UMD. For those who know what a UMD is, that's your Manning. They have a POM that I talked about. Now they have Manning. So they are an organization that we're still trying to mature, figure out their authorities and how they actually work across the entire air and space forces. And so that's huge. And then our investment plan. We have a plan that takes us out to FY32 right now that lays in funding to do the things that I've already talked about. And that's significant as well. And we keep surviving the hits of paying some of the corporate bills. And so I'm very excited that the community is getting a lot of investments to do all the things that SegWar needs us to do and the nation needs us to do moving forward. And then also Space Force. If you heard me talk about Space Force, they deploy in place. So when something happens, they don't go anywhere. That means they need that continuous power and water and support from, on-base systems and off-base systems. And so we're working to ensure that we have sensors deployed, that we understand what's happening as we go into a higher state of security. Our plan, this is the four things, this is how we bend our work, right? Knowing the terrain. What we found out is as we are looking at our mission threat analysis and identifying not just our IT systems, but our OT systems, how do they fit into the overall plan of your mission effectiveness? And so understanding and identifying where our hotspots are, what our priorities are, is very important because you can't fix everything. We don't have enough money. But we need to make sure that if we are investing in fixing and mitigating some of these vulnerabilities, that they are the right systems that protect our mission equities. And then you find all those gaps. You make a suggestion to invest in certain technologies and things like that. And one of the things I talked to Darryl and his team about is enterprise solutions. I don't need a lot of one-offs. That's what we have now. And that's why we're in the situation we are. Because if you're looking to upgrade and modernize our systems, we need enterprise solutions. So I'm asking, from an industry perspective, if you have solutions, understand where they fit into our architecture, and then help me fulfill those requirements. And then building our force. I talked a little bit about that, not just CE specialists, not just water specialists. I need cyber and IT and those types of skills in order to be able to do all the things that I've been asked to do. And then lastly, this hasn't changed. If you were here last year, the call to action is still the same. Do the basics, the basics of understanding that you're connected to something, right? Understanding what it means to patch, if you can patch. And if you can't, at least document that risk so that our aggregated risk doesn't outweigh what we need to do for our mission. Partnership and collaborations, events like this, Defend the Airport 2.0, Defend the Rail. I mean, all of those types of events signals to the community that we need help from you, the industry partners. And we need partnerships across not just the DOW, but the services, the things that the Army and Navy are doing that I don't have to do because I can just depend on them and then partner and figure out what they've done so that I can take advantage of it as well. We can, information sharing, looking at where we are as a community, looking at the solutions that you're able to provide, and understanding that. A big thing I've been talking about for at least 3 years is when we talk about IT, we must also talk about OT. And we're starting to have a lot of those types of conversations and accountability, from leadership all the way down to the tactical level of understanding where we need to make decisions about policy, make decisions about investment, and make decisions about mission risk. How do we do that at every level so that we can ensure that there's no mission degradation? Threat-informed investments. I have an intel person on my staff for a reason. I don't just need to know what's going on with my network. I need to know what the adversary is doing on a daily basis when it comes to this community as well. And so I get a lot of reports that come in that talk about this that now can help me, fight for more funding, can fight for different types of policies, fight for training. All of that is very important to helping me tell the story. And then modernization in what type of enterprise solutions, what type of tools and capabilities I need to arm F Cyber to be able to take care of the networks. And I will leave time for questions. Okay. I think I have 5 minutes worth of questions, maybe? Okay, yeah. Maybe 5-10 minutes.
Okay. Any questions?
Any questions?
And to our online folks, I'm looking at the chat. If there's anything, oh, sorry. Oh, we have a couple now.
Raise your hands up.
Yeah. Hello, Jose Fernandez from Montreal. One of the things that, hello?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, so one of the questions the question is, obviously IT and OT are different technologies, but also very different communities with different kinds of training. I imagine the Air Force has probably different military trades involved. How are you addressing that culture gap and the difference in languages and priorities and so forth? How are you dealing with that culture challenge?
I mean, and it starts with a lot of conversations. When we partner with 16th Air Force, because they take care of networks, the first thing they said is, well, we don't have any subject matter experts. We don't understand, the community. We don't understand the systems. And so part of that was we sponsored courses at AFIT, where you bring in both communities to be able to have those type of conversations, see what's happening, inclusion in exercises. That's great opportunity to train together, to watch and see what happens in this space. Sharing intel so that they can see what the adversary is doing in this space. Even down to the part of what does the data look like coming off of an HVAC system, right? What is normal behavior look like? And so you have to go through the entire training regiment to answer those types of questions and make sure that there is commonality in language, commonality in understanding, so that we can move forward together.
Quick question for you. First of all, appreciate your.
Lucian, you don't get any questions.
Just one. No, it's an easy one. You've got some successes you put on the slide there. I think some of those successes could translate over into potential policies for on the civilian side, all of the civilian airports we have in the country. Could we work with your staff and taking some of those lessons and successes and being able to incorporate them into what we put out on the civilian side to the FAA and TSA? I think that would be a real beneficial outcome of this conference.
Oh, absolutely. Information sharing is very important because, this is a big space, right? And we have a lot of one-offs and a lot of challenges that we can't solve by ourselves. So the complexity necessitates a lot of conversations. When I talk about that industry day, we don't need to have a day of industry conversation. It should be a continuous opportunity where Crocs and my office can have different types of conversations. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your presentation, your leadership in this area. So the question I have is recently the FCC issued a mandate, expanded the covered list for foreign routers, deeming them national security threats, which is something that the cyber community has known for a long time, public less so. So I'm just curious, two things, what you're doing in that area to help accelerate, getting those types of equipment out of the infrastructure of the Air Force, but also looking towards how that could help reinforce this action to get private industry to actually move on the issue.
Yeah, so anytime there's a order, we have to follow it. And you know, our governance process with DCDC over at Fort Meade issues a lot of task, you know, orders to remove, remediate, and things like that. And we follow that as well. When we get to this space, it's hard, right? You just can't pull a piece off, you know, a installation. And so it has to be a lot of conversations of what's important inside of this mission, acknowledging the vulnerabilities. If you can't patch it, then how do you now assess the risk to mission? And so we will depend on our subject matter experts at 16th Air Force to be able to help us with that.
Hello.
Oh, sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I've been in critical infrastructure OT for longer than I can remember, 20 plus years. So it's fantastic that the community here is coming together to continue to address it. Today, I work with many small companies that are developing amazing technologies. And so my question on their behalf today is, in the past, there have been programs like Cybers and others. Some of those have done well and others have been somewhat frustrating at times for the small companies. Some of them have been very successful. So we've got to take those. My question is, with the changing landscape, what are the channels to being able to bring these advanced technologies to your desk to make you aware of them, two, try them out, three, if they help for these small companies today?
Yeah, so a couple things. Cybers and sitters are back. You know, they had a pause for a while, and now they're back. You know, DOW has also more touch points in DIB. So if you haven't been following Honorable Davies, she talks about the DIB and some of the things that she wants to do, right? Not just CMMC, but really working with our smalls and mediums to get their technology inserted into our ecosystem. And so I would definitely recommend you reach out to Daryl. I just met with him yesterday, and one of my questions was, where are the enterprise solutions? Because I need to be able to scale across a huge ecosystem, all the bases that we're responsible for, over 180 bases, right? And this is just the Air Force. You have to think about the other services as well. So I would definitely reach out to him. And I'm trying to figure out how to also do a small and medium industry day, not just the bigs, to come in and tell me what your capabilities are. But when you do that, make sure that you know where it fits into our ecosystem and is a dual purpose. You know, can it fit into our IT networks and OT networks? Okay. Ah, and great building. Y'all have great
Right.
food too. Yes,
You put my mic on.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dr. Jones, we have just two questions here online. Good morning. The Port of Portland hired someone from the U.S. Air Force, newly retired, to lead the cybersecurity program starting in July. The port has airport and marine operations, plus the community surrounding the port facilities. What advice can you provide to the port for our new leader?
First, I would know who are all the players. You name some of those. And I would start by having conversations to level set the understanding of their role and what they need to partner with those particular entities. Airport security is different than marine security, right? And community. Understanding what that airport depends on, what that port depends on, and then I would do a map of, you know, who, what, when, and why, and how, and then work through commonalities of how can I secure my piece, which helps you secure your piece, and figure out how you can do some corporate investments together as well.
Okay. Yeah, and make sure that person attends.
Make
Defend the
sure that
Airport
person
next year.
attends the
Exactly.
Defend the Airport 3.
That's right. That's right. All right. Another question. Who can I reach out to get involved with the DCWF OT work role efforts? I'm not sure if I,
Yes.
is that, yeah? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Daryl Hagley.
Daryl Hagley, yes.
Yes,
I
he worked with a
concur.
lot of community partners, I'm not sure who, but, to kind of craft that, work role. And once that one goes through, we now have a map to bring in the rest of the work roles associated with this community.
Okay. Anybody else in the audience? Okay, we're going to finish with our last question over here. Excuse me, Tom.
I could have done it without the microphone. I have a big voice. For the online people, yes. So Doctor, thank you very much for the presentation. Quick thoughts or your views right now about AI, right? What's from your seat? I know this could be the rest of the day, but just to, AI right now from the front lines.
I think is necessary. We have to get out of our own way and, embrace what AI can do for us. Just think about AI for our cyber operators, right? We have a lot of data. We don't have a data problem, we have a data management problem. And AI can help us do that. When you think about AI enabled SOCs, being able to depend on those type of tools to get through the information, you set your baselines and behaviors, let the AI tool help you find those anomalies, and then the human piece of that is you now take it the rest of the way. But AI can help us jumpstart getting to quicker decisions, understanding what's happening to our systems if we set it up correctly. So I embrace, I'm a technologist by trade, so I embrace new technology. We just need to know what it's doing, train our people to use it effectively, to use it responsibly, and to understand when it's hallucinating as well. So, yeah. No, not problematic. I think Department of Air Force has been very cautious in how we deploy it. This administration is all about technology insertion to include AI. The AI strategy for the national strategy. The Department of Air Force also released maybe a month ago the AI strategy. So if you haven't read that, that would be good. And there's she just stood up a entire governance infrastructure to kind of shepherd us through some of the things that we think AI could be a multiplier for us. I say go for it. Responsibly, though.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Sit tight for one moment. We actually have a special addition to our agenda for Dr. Jones-Heath.
Here we go. Let me have that podium for a moment. Good morning, everybody. I have the privilege of being the chairman of the board of advisors of the Technology Advancement Center here, and you are most welcome. This is a critical place at a critical time for our industry, and we are blessed to have amongst us many leaders focused on making a difference and making our nation safer and better. One of them, who I met 5 years ago, of course, was our keynote speaker today. And I told her a couple of weeks ago that I was going to not surprise her, but sort of surprise her. And we were going to recognize her from the Military Cyber Professionals Association, which I've had the privilege of being around since 2014. We met 5 years ago at the Carnegie Mellon AI earliest first event kickoff by Greg Toohill. Not sure why I was there other than to make the coffee, but it was fun. Wanda has led from day one in everything she's done. If you meet the people who know her, they will tell her great story. Wanda is a member of the Senior Executive Service as the Principal Cyber Advisor for the Department of the Air Force, comprised of the U.S. Air Force and U.S. Space Force. As the Principal Cyber Advisor to the Department of Air Force, her duties include synchronizing, coordinating, and coming and making great speeches like the one this morning, cyber strategy, and advising the Secretary of the Air Force on all cyber programs. She is responsible for overseeing cyberspace recruitment, resourcing and training of cyber mission force, as well as assessing their readiness, overseeing acquisitions, advocating for cyber investments, cybersecurity supply chain, risk management, security of information systems, and weapon systems, all of it. She commands a team directly in some regard of over 5,000 people, and previously was the CISO of the Air Force. What a career, 36 years standing at the line, standing defending the nation, standing making a difference. Wanda exemplifies the very best of leadership in our community. She is a proven leader, innovator, and inspirer in chief, who consistently takes on the complex and difficult issues of our time and delivers with both excellence and integrity. It's critical. Her work at the highest levels of the Department of the Air Force reflects not only deeply technical expertise, but also a strategic vision that advances mission outcomes while strengthening the people and culture around her. And that may be the most important part of it all. What distinguishes Wanda most is the way she leads. She approaches difficult problems with clarity, resolve, and an uncommon heart, balancing mission urgency with a genuine commitment to those she serves alongside. And I can speak to that personally. Yeah. Many things we've done together, and I greatly appreciate your opportunity to work with you, Wanda. Her leadership style is grounded in kindness, inclusivity, and empowerment, creating environments where innovation thrives and teams are inspired to perform at their very best. She is actively shaping and implementing the kind of cyber leadership our nation needs: forward-leaning, mission-focused, and values-driven. Wanda represents everything we should seek to recognize and elevate across our community and our nation. And on that note, I would like to present to you the Gold Order of Thor from the Military Cyber Professional. And I have Major General George Franz and my dear friend Harry Wingo too to help me with this. Thank you with this. And there we go. We want to do the photo op now with the general presenting the good award to the wonderful Wanda. Wow. There we go. Wow.
You always told me last night, I think you want me to pass out on stage, I guess, I don't know. But certainly, I love what I do. I've had a wonderful, wonderful career working with so many great people, to include the three on the stage. And I mean, I still have a lot to give, and I want to continue to support the cyber community, includes IT and OT. I'm just appreciative. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And now we will return to the regular program.
Great.
How about that?
Yeah.
Lucia Niemeyer, it's all yours.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wanda, your certificate.
But Wanda, you guys stay here for just a minute. Yeah. So first of all, for those who don't know me, Lucia Niemeyer, I run a nonprofit building cybersecurity. It actually stemmed out on the work that I did while I was in the Department of Defense. Now, in 2017, when I joined the Department of Defense as the Assistant Secretary for Energy, Installation, and Environment, I had the opportunity to work with a dear friend of ours, Essie Miller. For as much as I loved working with Essie for the years on cybersecurity, I kind of really wish you were at the table too. Your leadership in the Air Force, I am channeling Daryl Hagley, who would love to be here today, but he's triple tasked. But I just want to say on behalf of the folks who are in the trenches every day, your leadership right now in the Air Force is critical. Love the fact we have success. I love the fact that you can speak OT. I wish you would tell Brendan over the Army and your Navy to do the same. But really do appreciate you taking the time to be here today. Your leadership for this crowd, but more importantly, what you're providing the Department of War is absolutely essential at this time. So thank you very much. Please pass. We need to get a picture for SA if you are. But more importantly, thank you for your leadership. Appreciate it. Yeah, that's it. All right, we're going to be bringing more chairs up to the stage, but I want to head and set the stage for next couple of days. So first of all, you're going to see a lot of me because of the fact that not only am I moderating for 2 panels, but I'm also going to be closing out the day and closing out tomorrow. And here's what's important about the next 2 days. We established this last year, and it was Daryl Hagley and I and Alexis worked with a group to say, hey, we need to bring a call to action together. And that is, we need to look at this sector, the airport sector, both military and civilian, because we felt last year it was a special target of opportunities for bad actors that ultimately could disrupt our commerce and our way of life very quickly. We came together last June for the first time. It was a success. We're coming together for the second time, again, for a call to action. The goal coming out of the next 2 days is not necessarily to listen to the folks on stage, but also to take notes, to send us ideas. Because ultimately, what we're going to do is we're going to take the ideas, just like we did last year, we're going to put them in a paper, and we're going to send them to the decision makers and policymakers in Washington, D.C., so we ultimately can push cybersecurity policy forward. So I just want to make sure we have the understanding and the intent. We will be holding town halls. Please stay for them at the end of the day, George and I, from 4:30 to from 4 to 4:30, and then each day. And our goal is to collect ideas and ultimately put them together in writing. We are just not here to listen. We're here to actually think, and we're here to take action. There's a great question that Wanda got about AI. My concern about AI is going to keep us from thinking, that we're going to be able to turn AI and we're going to have AI doing the thinking for us. We cannot afford to let that happen. So we actually see a challenge of the human spirit, challenge of human innovation that is enabled by AI, but ultimately requires us to reach above and beyond and start looking for the new ideas that's ultimately going to make us a safer nation, a safer world, more importantly, and more prosperous. So that is what the next 2 days is all about. It's a call to action. And right now, we are in a critical time. Question for the audience. Who thinks that we're actually in a hot war right now? All right, who thinks we're in a hot cyber war right now? All right, we are. We're also in a hot kinetic war. It just hasn't hit our shores yet. But over the next 2 days, we're going to talk about threats to airports that are existing right now. Threats that are actually impacting airports. Even since we last met in June, you've had airports around the world being hit by cyber attacks. You've got new ones emerging from nation states. The Iranians are working right now on Sandworm. You've got old players, Scattered Spider. You've got Lockbit. You've got a bunch of malware running around and nation states trying to get into critical systems in our country. Airports and airline safety are a particular target. As we know, just one minor attack or one minor disruption of the baggage handling system sends our entire traffic control and airport system into a frenzy. Passengers know right away, and you hear about it. So the goal today is focusing on this sector. What can we do with the expertise in this room? What can we do with policy moving forward that accomplishes two things? Reduces the risk to our economy from a transportation disruption, and more importantly, ensures passenger safety for a sector that relies on us to be able to do our job every day. They don't question their safety when they're traveling. We cannot give them a reason to, because we are not diligent on what the attacks we face as a country. So I'd like to go ahead and bring our first panel up. Yeah, oh, so sorry. So first thing we need to do is the panelists need to get mics and then come up on stage. And then, right, and then one of the panelists needs to grab my mic because I'm going to sit down for this too as well. So, all right. Hey, good to see you. Yeah. All right. While they're doing that, I just want to say that we're going to have two panels this morning. Definitely questions from the audience. We have a wide range of expertise on the panel, and then we're gonna, they'll be around for the day to also answer questions. If you have any questions that did not get to, please put them in writing, because we will want to address them at some point over the next 2 days and capture them for after action once the 2 days are done. Now, the goal also is to have an Airport 3.0 next year. So we're already starting to set the stage for that. So we need to figure out, based on this panel and the panel afterwards and what comes the rest of the day, what other information does this audience want to have as we're moving on. So anyway, I'll go ahead and get out from the podium, take a seat, and we have our other panelists coming up on stage. Fred. And Fred, can you grab a mic for me? Okay, great. Yeah, move around here without, yeah. Yeah, I do, and I got one. Have a seat.
You know what, I'll just do this back here.
Okay, so this first panel is going to focus on where are we falling short on national policy. And it's not to say that that it is failing. It's more to say is what more can we do? One thing about the threat that we face, particularly in the cyber realm, but we'll also be talking about kinetic threats today, is that it's dynamic and it's changing. People may not realize that since on the kinetic side, because we're focusing both on kinetic and cyber threat. People, how many folks in the room heard about a drone attack at Barksdale Air Force Base? Does anybody realize how serious that was? 4 days over a bomber base of a threat they could not figure out that shut down that Air Force base for all operations for 4 days as a strategic asset. We're still trying to figure out exactly what happened and how it happened. So when we talk about failing policy, it's not just necessarily what is being put out on the civil aviation side, but what are the new threats we are facing as a nation just in the last 6 months that we didn't even think about could happen on our shores? How are we addressing all types of threat to aviation, civil and military? So the first panel, we're going to talk about not necessarily the problems, but also where do we potentially need to focus on solutions. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have each panelist just introduce yourself briefly, and then we're going to open it up with a couple of moments of comments about what you see as the big ticket items. What we want to do is get the ideas out first, and then we'll follow up with some questions, but I'll be looking for the audience to raise a hand. We don't necessarily need to wait till the very end. If someone's got a question with somebody said, I'll go ahead and recognize them. So over to you, Chris.
Excuse me, my name is Mario Zuniga.
How are you?
I'm retired from the Air Force in 2018. I flew in AWACS, so aviation is very near and dear to me. I got exposed to the cyber world while I was in uniform. And so I've spent my time now at MITRE for the last 6 years, focused on how to integrate cybersecurity for weapon systems, but I extract that to systems of systems because I think from a cyber perspective, a car, a satellite, a plane, submarine, from cyberspace, it's all the same.
Good morning. Ray Seacrest, CISO for Tampa International Airport. My team is responsible for just about all operations of IT and OT cybersecurity at the airport, with the exception of penetration tests and 24/7 monitoring. So we do the normal. We bring systems on, tune systems, work with vendors, retire systems, upgrades, mitigate findings. That's what my team does. And thank you for mentioning submarines. I was in the submarine service, so thank you.
I'm Donnie Bogert. I work for the Department of Transportation here in Maryland. I defend everything from the railway to the airports, and I'm very happy to be on this panel.
Fred?
Fred Gordy, I'm the technical director for building cybersecurity.org, and I've had the honor of working with Lucian for about 5 years as we developed a standard based around ISA 62443 for building control systems and to protect physical systems. Sorry about that. But in my day job, I'm the SVP of KMC Controls, Secure Connected Solutions.
All right, so Ryan, I think Ryan, you were here last year, I believe?
Yes.
Okay, great. What have you seen just in the last year that's brought you back here as far as the evolving landscape, the threat landscape, and what's happening right now at the airport level?
It's nice to see this continue. We see more drone activity is highly of interest, from what Ukraine did to the Air Force Base you mentioned. OT side, again, you mentioned baggies, that is a big concern of ours. The threat landscape being an active cyber war. Everything like that, the upcoming tsunami of patches we may face, the advent of AI and how it affects the landscape, as well as attacks on identity and access management.
Now, we had on stage last year somebody from Tulsa Airport, and they did report an attack in January 2026 on the IT side. How are you taking some of those public reporting And how do you respond to that? I mean, that was one particular malware, but there are other ones out there. Are you feel like the threat intel is staying current with you, or maybe that's an area that we need to focus on? Because I know right now we mainly get threat intel from the aviation ISAC, but that's a huge organization.
Yes.
And it may not be exquisite for what you're trying to do with your airport. So any ideas there, what we could do to make that better?
So I always say that I'm a greedy guy because I want more. I want more intel. I want more definitive intel. And how exactly does it apply to our organization? But that's up to us to determine that. There was another aspect to your question.
It was
We
just a
see-
Tulsa
okay,
attack.
we'll take one of these reports.
Yeah.
For instance, we took a SANS small paper, 2.5 pages on identity and access management. And you just open it up and look at it. Okay, where is it attacked? Where do the attacks go? What systems are we aware of and not aware of? And how do we close these gaps and how do we mitigate what we can?
Yeah.
So I can't say we do every white paper that comes out, but we will take papers, we will dissect them and see how they apply to us and then find gaps. On the side, we run backdoors and breaches. I don't know if anybody's played that board game. That's a staple on our team. We say we have a love-hate relationship with it because during the game, when we play it and we find all these gaps, we look for 3 to 6 gaps a game that we can put on a task board and work. At the end of the game, we love it because then we find things that we can do better with. So that helps us address threats too.
Absolutely. Now, Donnie, last year we focused on federal policy, and where do we need to make changes there? We did touch a little bit, but I think we didn't really focus on state policy. You're in a unique role right now in Maryland. Talk to us a little bit about how you're looking at, you don't necessarily want to diverge, but how you're looking at the implementation of state policy when it comes to BWI and other airports here, and how close are you working with the airport authority there?
So when it comes to state policy, we still have to align with the federal policy. The airports still have to meet TSA requirements. So a lot of the state policy requirements also come from the federal baseline and the policies they've already implemented. I will say now policies, getting rolled out much faster these days, which is not the usual for most people. Technology has seemed to always move faster than policy, right? And now we're starting to see, some redundancy in policies between state and federal, but I think they're aligned more than we think. It's just now closing the gap of keeping up with how those policies are being, rolled out.
Yeah, how much are you interacting with the airport itself? So you ultimately can gain from the expertise that they're seeing in the field, and to make sure that you are in a way working together to make it consistent.
Yeah, I mean, with the airport, we have, all these OT systems, and this IT collaboration is, very new. So the airport has a lot of OT systems that other transportation agencies and state agencies don't necessarily have. So working with them and looking at their policies on OT and IT in general, kind of bridging that gap and seeing where can we apply those policies, not just from the airport, but to all state transportation.
Now, next panel, we're going to have somebody from Baltimore Washington Airport, so I'm sure you can ask the hard questions there. So hopefully stick with it. All right, MITRE. I asked in the last panel, Dr. Jones-Heath, can we take the success stories? Can we take the work that's been done in the Air Force and somehow translate that into updated guidance on the civilian side? You're doing a lot of work right now with MITRE Attack, MITRE Defend.
Yep.
Ultimately, how can some of the civilian airports that may not be familiar with MITRE, how do we ultimately make that connection so you can take the work you're doing right now with the federal government and ultimately offer it up to some of the airport authorities around the country?
That's a really good question. So I think probably just more engagement across the community. You mentioned ISACs earlier. MITRE is definitely intertwined in a number of different ISACs, maybe unofficially, but there's probably going to be some presence there. So I think it's reaching out and all kind of, it is just a complex environment of how much information you just don't know about. And so I think sharing, collaborating, I think bringing together in different environments to show what's happening, what's in the realm of possible. You mentioned Defend. There's a lot of tools and knowledge tools out there that we're just trying to normalize cybersecurity and reflection of policy and how to bring that together. Everybody is very familiar with IT. Everybody's that's, I think, majority of what people think of for cybersecurity. It is normalizing that OT is very relevant and is very connected, and understanding that relationship, because all the gentlemen here highlighted that IT and OT typically match up together some way. So it's understanding how it's all interconnected, but reaching out to MITRE and just becoming more familiar with the tools that we're trying to expand to be inclusive of OT.
So I think that's one of the things, you shared with us some information prior to this session. It's a PhD level. I mean, it really is. What the work that MITRE does is truly beneficial for our country, but you really got to dive into the weeds. Is there something that maybe we can work on where we can translate for the aviation sector, particularly the airport sector? What are some of the control sets that come out of attack and come out of defend that would be easy to implement, for somebody that's trying to manage stuff every day at an airport? I'm putting you on the spot.
You are.
I know.
Yeah. No, that's a good
Let's
question.
put it as a do it out from the company.
Well, in my engagements the last couple of years, I've had similar customers come to me and say,
Please dumb it down.
yeah, well, there's that aspect, but then they're looking for, I have to defend an airplane and I was told I have to follow STIGs.
Yeah.
There's no STIG, there's no guidance. So I think it's the normalization of cybersecurity, regardless of the domain that you're dealing with.
Right.
But to your point, I think we need to work on normalizing and getting it a little easier, lowering the bar.
The hook. No,
Okay.
Fred, you and I have been working on this. All right. So what we did is we took 62443, pretty sophisticated set of controls for oil and gas. We actually pulled some stuff from MITRE ATT&CK as well. We also pulled some stuff from CIS, and we put together a framework that is, for lack of a better word, dumbed down for commercial facilities. We are now ultimately, it's not that hard for us to translate into an airport standard. What are your recommendations? I know when we worked with IFMA to bring the aviation sector in here, what are you working on right now in the training, which is truly what we need? I know you just came from a SANS conference last week. Talk to us a little bit about what you would want to offer airport managers and airport engineers as far as training.
What I'd like to start with is, and get to that, is just a little bit about my history. I was a system integrator for 25 years. So I'm the one that created the problem, okay? We as system integrators are the lowest common denominator of, it doesn't matter if it's a data center, a hospital, an airport, whatever it is. Nobody watches us. You can have a policy this thick, but when it gets to me, the one that's programming it, I could care less about that unless I'm told to. Now, what we're doing, Lucian talked about SANS. I recently got
SANS.
okay.
I'm so sorry for an audience meeting.
Yes, thank you. He keeps me straight. SANS, if you're not familiar, it's SANS Institute. They are the premier certification and training body for ICS, Industrial Control Systems, oil and gas and electrical. They asked me to be their first ever building controls instructor. And so I spent 2 days at the ICS summit, but prior to that, a customer who everybody would know if I said their name, but they're like the 7th largest financial institution in the world. They're doing something nobody else has done, but I've been telling SIs, get ready for this. They are teaching their people, or I'm going to teach their people how to assess their buildings based on 62443 framework. Now, what are the implications there? Now the SI, the guys that created the problem, the customer is coming using the framework and saying, this is where everything is. And if we don't pay attention down the chain, past the policy, past the, I've got pictures from military bases where you're not supposed to use wireless, but there's antennas. There are 2 network cables coming into a controller. One side is Nipper, the other side is, guess what? It's a DSL modem open to the office. And the explanation I had was, we're running behind, so the guys back at the office are programming, and it's connected to the Nipper network. So we got to watch the SIs and the people responsible for taking care of the facilities.
So, this is a call to action. We're setting that stage for the rest of the couple days. Name a couple things, Fred. I'll just start with you and we can work back. Name a couple things that if you were to tell an audience, go back, and particularly for the airport managers and airports that are here, go back and do this today. Just start there.
Asset management, get an accounting of what you have. I've been doing this for the cyber part for 10 years. I have never done a system where I didn't find something nobody knew about. So, real quick, financial institution, they said there were 4 things on their network. I found 32. One of them was a Raspberry Pi. And it's like, where is this? It took them 2 weeks to find. So asset management is the cornerstone to a cybersecurity.
Okay, so I want to make sure we're clear here. So there's 2 aspects to that.
Yeah.
Knowing what you actually have on your airport.
Yes.
All right, and then knowing what's connected.
Yes.
Right. So those are 2 separate things, right?
Well, my core things that I ask people when I go in before we even do an assessment, do you know what you have? Do you know how it's connected? And do you know who has access? Most people cannot answer all 3 of those, any of them, but definitely a lot of them can't answer all 3 of them.
Okay, that's a day 1. So you leave here tomorrow, on Friday, you ask that question. What would your recommendation be for the first step out for folks leaving the conference today to go do?
I would say that's a solid foundation. I would continue to understand that it's all interconnected. I have had many conversations with customers who are like, I've done my IT cybersecurity. Check. Like, yeah, but what about everything else? All that other technology that is interconnected, designed specifically so the ones and zeros run across each other. And I can't really add much more than understanding asset management and just knowing that you probably are a little more vulnerable than you anticipated.
Man, I'm hoping somebody says change your passwords and check your MFA. So, Donnie, I mean, other than go talk to your state, what are the other things that you recommend coming out of the chute?
I would say get visibility over your environment. And then while you gain that visibility, try and collect as much data as you can. I mean, most time with OT, a lot of people thought physical security, not cybersecurity. So get visibility over these, devices that don't do normal or don't have normal IT behavior and really get to know what exists.
All right, Ryan, which one resonated with you?
I go off of what Fred said, so I'm going to sound like a broken record. Asset management, and I define that as hardware, software, and I'd even include APIs right now. So we all know that how many assets do you have? How many you're aware of? If you don't know about them, how can you patch them? How can you mitigate them when they're end of life and you simply can't replace them or upgrade them? So what are the mitigations you can put in place? Same thing goes with software. Sometimes you're locked into running a legacy piece of software, and at that current time, you can't upgrade it. So how do you protect it? And we look into LLM hijacking or API compromise, which leads to the hijacking of the AI tokens. You want an inventory of your APIs as well too. Interconnected, you couldn't have said it better. But I hear it too at we call it the deck plate level. You hear, well, we're segmented, we're air gapped, and then you got to do the legwork and show them that you're really not as protected as you think you are.
Myra's got one follow-up. But before that, does anybody from the audience want to add what needs to happen on a Friday at an airport based on what they've just heard so far? But Mario, go ahead.
So, one thing that I've kind of come to think through and observe is traditionally people will bin their risk analysis and the systems that they're looking at. Is it IT or is it OT? And so they tend to bin it and they treat them separately and they don't necessarily look at them holistically. So we talked about interconnection. We talked about how you need to understand how the systems are working. You need to understand all of the components here and how they're interconnected. So you need to do your risk analysis and your understanding of what are my weaknesses and dependencies and vulnerabilities holistically, not I've done my cybersecurity, IT, RMF, ATO checkoff. Now let me go get my special OT person if I happen to have that and look at it differently. Need to be cognizant of.
Anything more from the audience on that or questions on that? All right. Intel. One of the things that we talked about in our prep call is that for as much as we have an aviation ISAC, it may not necessarily provide the timely intel we need at the airport level. What do you think we need to do to ultimately get to those building managers, those airport managers, those airport engineers, get them more in the loop of what is happening, what the Iranians are trying to do to us, or what other nation states are trying to do to us, where we're seeing spoofing on some of our on some of our nav aids? How do we enhance that intel chain, or do we suggest that maybe it's not the aviation ISAC, maybe it's a real estate ISAC that's more geared towards the OT and the facilities? What are your thoughts on that? I'll just open it up to anybody. Fred, I'll hit you up first.
Wow, okay, this is a real squishy subject. So, I mean, from an airport standpoint, you know, OT systems are somewhat consistent if they're operational. And one of the things that we see is activities that are not normal, but are not trying to draw your focus. And what's happening there is, and this is maybe not exactly going there, but is I tell people all the time, your OT systems can be your place that your bad guy sits to figure out things. We see from time to time, there's little things that are just inside there that are abnormal to me because I'm looking at them, but they're planting stuff. They're planting them in your systems. How many of you are familiar with the Manchurian candidate? We got a lot of them out there because those building systems are a great place for them to sit and observe. And what other way to cause mass chaos, like Lucian said, fire them off and just let it. I live in Atlanta. Atlanta screws up, it screws up the East Coast big time. So.
All right. I'm going to ask another question. I love audience questions. They're not going to ask us questions. We're asking them questions. All right. Here, how many here have heard of the Chinese malware Volt Typhoon? All right, it's getting better. It's getting better. There are crowds that we've talked to that maybe a half a dozen hands go up. So that is another living off the land malware that is different from what others, which might be a ransomware attack. This actually was intentionally planted by the Chinese government. They've acknowledged it in order to threaten our critical infrastructure at a time of their choosing. So this is the equivalent, and believe it or not, it made headlines back in 2003. Folks have seemed to have forgotten about it. It made headlines because of a comparison to a cyber bomb that's been placed in American U.S. infrastructure. So we're talking power systems, water systems, fuel systems. The Chinese are just waiting to activate. So there is a range of threats. Now, there's not much an airport can do when your power goes out or the water goes out. But these are the types of threats right now that we are faced with that we're working pretty hard to eradicate from Department of Defense war systems as well as from civilian infrastructure as well. So these are the types of threats that we're faced with. Go ahead, Fred. Sure.
How many in here actually have the vendor, the people that have the most knowledge of your systems as part of your incident response plan? Disaster recovery. If you don't, you better, because they're the ones that have the most information about how to bring that back online. But calling them at the last minute to show up and they got 100 trucks on the street, they might get to you in a couple of hours.
All right, so we need to take that one down because that is a policy item that we can implement either at the state level or at the federal level, which is a review, outside review of your incident response plan to include a review of a tabletop exercise that's done at the airport level and who actually is involved in that.
Right, and the vendors have to be.
I'd like to add in.
Absolutely, fire away.
How do you prepare an airport for a power outage or loss of water? So we're running more tabletops across the airport. We run an enterprise one once a year, and the lofty goal is 1 a quarter with departments. So we'll work with perhaps procurement or maintenance. And with these departments here, a cybersecurity tabletop exercise, the eyes glaze over and they're kind of intimidated. And we approach it as What do you need when you lose your computers? What do you need when you lose these systems? And it starts with the awareness of how are they impacted? What do they need? Do they need to go to pen and paper? Do they have a backup plan? Do they need supplies so that they can stabilize the situation?
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Sorry, I don't want, and if you can't answer the question because you don't want to or can't. Right now, if you have a physical intrusion into the airport, you have to evacuate the airport because ultimately you have an unsafe airport, right? Is that how you all handle it now? If you have a breakdown in physical security, if somebody gets through magnetometer, you kind of got to go into a lockdown, don't you?
Tampa has its own police department, so we would work closer with the airport police department, and we run drills with them and talk to them, and they're very active.
How would do you believe your incident response allows for what happens to a cyber attack to an access control point or your doors or your HVAC system? Is there a similar process for a lockdown or engage the police to try to maintain safety and maintain that, or is that attack that HVAC system considered more a nuisance because no longer the airport's being heated? How would you handle that?
I think we have room to mature with building controls and HVAC systems. We definitely do. The focus has been more on physical security attacks or loss of power, loss of systems. Again, how departments are impacted. You'll hear from various departments that I can't do my job. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's working with them to bridge that gap to realize that we're going to lose these functions and these are the top 3 or 5 critical ones we need to do.
Ryan, thanks for staying with me on that because I think that's one thing Fred and I have figured it out. Is that when for instance, I'll just say building X, a high rise in city Y, gets hit with a cyber attack to its elevators or to its HVAC system. I think even in our world, in the commercial facilities world, owners are not realizing they have a fundamental safety threat to the occupants of the building. That it's no longer, hey, let's come up with some temporary cooling or something like that while we fix the problem. It is, okay, that HVAC system is connected to that fire control. If that fire control is down, then that building is no longer safe for occupancy. Therefore, we need to evacuate the building from an HVAC, attack. And it may be down not just for hours, it may be down for days or weeks as you're trying to resolve and restore the integrity of those systems. You're right. Maturity wise, not just for airports, but across all sectors, we're not there yet. We're not there yet, understanding yet that an OT attack has a physical safety risk that ultimately is a fundamental responsibility of whoever's running that asset to ensure occupant safety highest point. So
I'm taking mental notes.
Yeah,
I can go back to risk management and say, okay, in the event of this, what are the long-term effects?
right. And I think that's one of the things that Fred and I have been making the case that we need to update how we do tabletop exercises for anything in the built environment to include airports. And the reason why I think that sector would be one we should prioritize is because of the movement of the critical safety aspects of running an airport. I think that's something that we definitely need to look at as a policy coming out here, not just incident response, because that's a key part of it, but how you exercise that. And does the incident response include safety as the highest regard? And ultimately, do we need to evacuate an airport, which, as you know, is your worst nightmare in a day, is having to evacuate an airport, let alone stop traffic, aircraft traffic, but also just having to get everybody out of the building.
Right.
So, all right. Questions from the audience? All right. Now we got some going. Go ahead.
Hold on.
Yeah. It's for the online audience.
So this is really interesting, hearing about how the impact to OT and the facility systems can be impacting operations. It occurs to me, in your tabletops and your thought process, what happens when a fire suppression system or something that's OT related is triggered in a malicious manner across the IT systems? So you fire off that fire suppression in your server rooms, where all that critical systems are located. You've not only shut it down, you've destroyed it. How do y'all think that through, and how do you react to that?
That's a bad day right there. Because now you're down. Now you've completely seized up everything about that airport. Not just that fire suppression system, but all the associated IT systems. I'm not sure I can't imagine anybody's actually planned for that scenario. But you're right. That's about the worst thing you can have. That it takes down both IT and OT.
Good.
We're taking notes.
Get your OT devices integrated with your cyber tools. So hopefully you can see that weird behavior prior to it actually occurring.
All right, so let's talk about that. Okay, because Fred and I know where you're at. Let's talk air gaps and firewalls and the pros and cons of trying to air gap and firewall your OT. I'm of the camp right now that that is archaic and that is legacy. That you ultimately have to go with what you just mentioned, Donnie. You ultimately have to want to integrate your OT so you can monitor it, so you can look for those anomalies or that potential a vulnerability, and you're monitoring at the same level you're monitoring your IT. So you're more holistically looking at the protection of your systems. There's still an entire camp out there, I'm not sure where MITRE is, about air gapping and firewalling and then maintaining separate micro-segmentation. When we talk about micro-segmentation, I think that it's the ability to micro-segment when you need to isolate, but not necessarily to start off from a point of isolation. Is that where you're kind of going on that?
Yeah, I mean, these days everything is connected, right? Updates have to come in, have to get pushed. With OT, most of the time you need someone to physically come on site to, install firmware because that network is totally firewalled off. They can't get to it remotely. That's changing. So it's not just, I get their own separate segmentations, and I think you're right. It's only that play because that's a kind of a failsafe. Like if something goes wrong or this network does get, hit with an attacker, we can isolate it off and contain, the actual threat. But I think it gets bigger into your cyber tools and, monitoring the traffic. And what I hear a lot, especially from, OT, is their devices are very fragile, right? Yeah. If I put a security scan on a certain OT device, I could be the problem, right?
Yeah, you could definitely cause them a bad day.
Yes.
But it goes back. There was a great question in the prior panel you asked about that culture between IT and OT and having them come together. And we cannot have the HVAC guys who I grew up as an Air Force civil engineer, so we had knuckle dragging HVAC guys in my squadron. They don't want anybody touching their HVAC systems. But the modern HVAC system is more a computer than it is actually a physical system. So I think we have to overcome that. And the airport sector has to be the ones to start because everything is so absolutely tied into passenger safety. But the goal is, and this is, look, I was working with SC back in 17 and 18. It's really tough to get the IT team to talk to the OT team and then to trust each other. And so you have the IT team saying, hey, don't put that crap on my network. And the OT guys are saying, hey, don't patch my HVAC systems. So I think we ultimately have to overcome that because of the fact that normally those knuckle dragging HVAC guys that I grew up with are not checking their systems every day. They're only going to a system when something's not going right. So they don't know whether there's been a malware or something implanted in there. And they don't know whether there is or monitoring is going on, nefarious monitoring. So I think, we've been speaking this for years. There's people in this room, they've been talking for 10 years about having to converge the two. I just think that should definitely be a policy recommendation that comes out of the next 2 days that we have to focus on this for the airport environment. Fred, you were going to add something.
I'm going to send some homework home with you. But the first thing is when I hear air gap, that just tells me you're not looking at it. That's it. I mean, there's so many times I find stuff connected to air gap networks. But when an event happens and you think that IT and OT are definitely separate, which in this particular case they were, there was no network connectivity between them. That's not, they are connected. We're in a data center, that's the lifeblood, power and cooling. Look up Equinix Data Center, Singapore. The vendor was just upgrading the system, locked out 2 chill water buffer tanks. And it was 1.5 million transactions dumped because Citibank and DBS Bank were in there. They didn't even know how to fail. They tried to fail over to their other data centers. The point that I'm getting at, study that, because really in an event, it doesn't matter what the event is at that time. Nobody was prepared to act.
And then, and of course, all the folks who are in the OT space know the case studies like Target, that started out in one HVAC system. or Sands Casino that started out in the thermometer of an aquarium in the lobby. So there are definitely amazing ways through inadvertent connections or just through an OT vulnerability that ultimately migrates in IT. There was a question in the audience. Oh,
Okay,
my God.
yeah, we have
There's a
some
bunch of
online too,
questions.
and we're getting a little tight on time here, Lucian. We have some.
So
we
you
have some-
you're basically telling me to stop talking? Just focus on the audience and online, right? All right, so one audience question, then we'll go to one online question.
All right, hold on.
Who had an audience question?
Who with the audience
There's a
question?
bunch of them.
Okay.
Like 5 of them.
So sorry to be a broken record, but just back to this issue of the FCC router mandate, which was not out of the blue. It was the result of years of lobbying by people like Rob Joyce about TP-Link. The same vulnerabilities are inside much of our smart hardware. They're all inside of our networks. So what are we going to do to put the spotlight on that and get some real action?
All right, so bottom line is the fact that I've picked up on first 2 sessions. This is what you're going to focus on. Can you write us a paragraph on how we need to pass this on to the FAA and TSA, and then we'll make sure that we are addressing that issue. Online.
Okay, we had 3 online. I'm gonna read 3 of them, and then why don't you just maybe
Well,
answer
you all figure
collectively?
out which ones you want to answer.
Exactly, because I don't know if we have time for all of them. 1, has anyone in airport ICS considered OT DMZs? Are there solutions similar to Clarity or Run Zero within the airport cyber teams? Okay, that's 1. 2, question, do you or your customers run disaster recovery drills? We have found these to be very useful in the IT, OT, in identifying gaps in procedures.
Okay,
And 3,
interesting.
or is it too much to?
No, I'm just
cover?
trying to figure out how you define a disaster in the,
Okay,
in the.
and then lastly, how are we not prepared for these training exercise scenarios after 20+ years of IT, OT, tabletop exercises, Hollywood depictions, and
Yeah.
modern cloud
All right, all
SAS?
right. So first of all, I'm a huge Die Hard fan. So I've seen this coming down for a while. I think it was Die Hard 2, and you're like, okay, that can happen. As a matter of fact,
Right.
there's a couple of things that are actually in those. So Hollywood is right. All right. I'm going to take the third one first.
Okay,
I personally have been doing this now for 10 years. When you do a tabletop exercise, it's mainly run by the CISO, and I don't think we're accounting for as much as we should the linkages that are growing by the day in the OT world. So I'm not necessarily saying someone's failing. I say there just needs to be a better understanding and sophistication of the threat actors that we're using tabletop exercises that were from 5 years ago, 6 years ago. The threat's evolving by the month. So instead of pulling off a tabletop exercise from somebody from a third party consultant X, I think you need to ask yourself, what is the current threat, and make sure we're doing a tabletop exercise off the stuff that's happening today and last month and 2 months ago. So there might need to be some work done either through AI or to update your tabletop exercises to making sure you're capturing the current threat. Anything you all want to add on that one?
Know your culture.
Yeah.
What's acceptable.
Yeah.
How far you can go with the tabletops.
Now,
Stakeholders too.
know your
yeah.
stakeholders.
Gotta make sure everyone's at that table when you have that exercise, or when it comes to life, someone gets left out. Ooh.
Get your audience at where they are. Don't go in with college level books if you're dealing with kindergartners. You gotta work it up.
Don't say sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the defensive there. I know you got PhD level stuff over at MITRE.
Yeah, well, my first meeting at MITRE, there was 30 people around this table arguing about the reading list.
Yeah.
I
All
didn't
right.
know what was.
So I don't want to lose those questions. Disaster response. I mean, that's
yeah.
you
You want me just to, it was, do you run disaster recovery drills? We found them useful in the IT, OT, identifying gaps. And are there similar solutions to Clarity or Run Zero within the airport cyber teams?
Yeah, I would, first of all, let's answer the first question. So yes, there is a opportunity for a full range of technologies that ultimately could be monitoring the ICS within the airport space. That's an easy one, and I think it's just a matter of educating and going back to the training we talked about. I do believe that one of the things that has to come out of this session next 2 days is we've got to enhance or offer specific training for airport engineers, airport technicians, those running the airport airport, public works, for lack of a better word, we call it in the military, public works or installations, that we offer that training that includes access to technologies that ultimately can make their jobs easier. So I think that's how we get to deploying some of the sponsors that you have here, deploying their technologies into the airport space. It has to start with the airports themselves being trained on what the threat is, what they should be focusing on. They've got a limited budget like everybody else. What should they be looking at? That might be a critical requirement. I'm more speaking for you on that, but
Yeah, so in preps for this call, we had a couple sentences we exchanged, and I'm looking for, love the baggage handling team. They are great individuals. They do a wonderful job. We're asking them to secure their equipment that they've never been trained on, and it's not in their job description. So one of my goals is, how do I bring some knowledge to the team? Because they're a separate team and they do a fantastic job, but security was never in there.
and I, as somebody who is a frequent traveler, there's nothing more emotional event than having a baggage handling truck. That you go from 0 to 60 really fast if something happens to the bags, as we knew from the CrowdStrike downfall, where bags were circulated all around the country, and it was a wild show. Any other questions from the audience? We are running short on time. I basically was told Alexis to shut up and just ask questions.
Hi, thank you. You guys are talking about a lot of tools and technologies and cyber capabilities connecting IT, OT, but what is your solution to alert fatigue?
All right, we have
Alert fatigue.
in our environment that
As
as a manager, we would work with this tool and I'd say, it's Tune It Tuesday, right? It's just a phrase. We would open up the console and we'd look at policies and we'd pick one of the alerts in there and tune it. Sometimes it was noisy and we had to work with a vendor to clean it up, and other times it just wasn't good for our environment. So as time goes on, we get a new account manager for that tool, and he wants to review the settings, so he's familiar with this. And he goes over the policy sections. Wow. I've never seen so many policies enabled. Let's look at your alerts. And he goes back to the alert section. He says, you have a handful of alerts. I mean, I see people that have turned this tool on with the default number of policies and alerts enabled, and you have far fewer than they do. So it comes down to, if you can work with your vendor and tune it for your environment and see what you can do with that. That's been our approach, and it's worked well for us.
All right. Any other? Oh, got one in the back. You got two. Go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah, we'll do those two.
We're not going to let you go. So just.
Good morning, Bob Van Horn from John Hopkins APL. Thank you. There's been some great discussions.
Yeah.
If currently sitting with OSD, working for the cyber director, Fred, totally take your point about if the policy is 3 inches thick or 1 inch thick, if there's no oversight, if there's no accountability, it really doesn't matter, kind of at the bleeding edge. But I'm interested in thoughts on, as I read documents like the DFARS, or if you know, State of Maryland, I'm sure has something that is similar to that. I can say it's probably cyber compliance focused. If in the future, if we take, to bring it, Lucian, back to your start of, you know, where can policy approve? If we were to take documents like that and say cyber compliance good, cyber resiliency needs to be a focus. Downstream impacts to, you know, places like Booz Allen, probably not as much, but if they're small businesses, what does that kind of mean? I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts on a shift from a policy perspective of cyber compliance to cyber resilience, taking Fred's point of let's assume that it is made accountable and followed up. Over.
I can start. But I have some very critical points on compliance. So does anybody else want to jump in first?
My thing is with compliance, when we think about compliance and security, I mean, I hate to say, but in practice, most people just check a box with compliance, right? It's not about actually securing that environment. So when you're actually implementing these security controls, make sure you're actually getting the security end of it and not just checking a box to go back to tell the auditors or whoever is running that assessment that, oh yeah, I do this, or, you know, I've accomplished this.
I promise I'll keep it short. But you said something and it's just spot on. It's really, at the end of the day, this is about resilience. So it really, I always say, it doesn't matter what the event is when it happens. It's nobody's prepared really, and cyber can actually help prepare you for that. So I'll stop there.
All right, I'll go one step further. I want to work with you on a safety framework. So I'll go one step past resilience, and I would say it boils down to human and public safety in a critical sector for that looks at safety every day. But I want to talk real quick on compliance, and Wanda, you're gonna have to close your ears. And with all due respect to Katie Arrington, who's a dear friend of mine, CMMC is the devil. All right. Because what you're doing is you're telling an entire defense industrial base, spend $200,000 to get a certification on COE preservation, build a repository, do all these things. So what we've got 200,000 companies chasing a certificate, for which then they put that certificate on the wall and they say, hey, we're cyber secure. We got that certificate. When the adversaries are running laps around that, they already exfiltrated all your data. They're doing other things to the DIB, all right? So I am dead set against trying to chase compliance no matter what we're doing. All right. Now I know every company here has to do it because that's the rules right now. But ultimately, it's counterproductive to us because we're setting up these compliance regimes. Everyone's chasing that. The threat's evolving by the month. All right. And then we're worried about a compliance regime that was set up 2 years ago, which really doesn't do anything for anybody other than costs a lot of money and builds a practice on somebody who can comply. So, all right. All right. So anyway, and look, and Katie and I were talking about this back in 2017. I lost, she won. But bottom line here is the fact that I think that's something we need to look at is resilience and safety more than compliance. And we'd love to talk to you more. Not resilience as much. I want to talk about cyber safety. Yeah. All right. Any more questions? You can see I'm opinionated. Anything more from the audience?
Yeah.
How about last final thoughts before you all leave the stage and go mingle? I'll start. Donnie, anything last you want to leave with the audience?
Yeah, when you guys get back, just again, know everything about your environment, visibility, inventory. One thing that keeps me up is that device I am not aware of, right?
Yeah. Fred.
Think evil, do good. So that's what when I walk in a building, I'm trying to figure out how to kill it. There's no program management, no budget, any of that. The bad guy doesn't think like you. They always think out of the box.
All right, I'll end with you, Mario.
I know this is a broken record, but it's all connected. It's all interconnected. Compliance sets principles and intent, but resiliency, safety is what it all comes down to. So what keeps me awake is things can actually happen that you don't think can happen. And air gapped is not a protection.
All right, Tampa, bring us home.
Fred said when he talks about when you go into a system or an environment, think evil, do good. I look at it as I'm very happy the support I get from the IT team because I rely upon them extensively. And their job is to stand systems up, make them work, make them talk together and connect. My team looks at the same data they have. We look at it as a different way. How can this be broken? How can this be abused? Talk about impact of how the systems connect. I'm going to go back to the question. Compliance has been my best friend. It allows me to get funding. It allows me to get an asset inventory, software, hardware. I get things upgraded. It has some overhead and some burden to it, and it's far from perfect. When PCI first came out, we'd have a tagline in our email that said, secure by compliance or something, because that's how bad it was.
Yeah.
And
All right.
connectivity. So,
all right. So
basics.
the audience members are going to be available. Unfortunately, we have to move to another panel, so you can't necessarily rush stage right now to get their autograph. But hopefully everybody will stick around during the break and ask them more questions. I want to say thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to the second panel, so they can go get mic'd up, right?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. And I know Lucian is moderating the next panel. So if those panelists would please come on up here to get their mics. Appreciate the quick turnover.
All right, we're going to go ahead and get started because we do want to get to the breakout sessions and some of the demonstrations. So this is going to be part two we have obviously a new set of panelists. and to take a unique perspective representing academia as well as authorities. So I'm going to go ahead and start off. I'm not going to introduce myself again. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves down the line here, and then we'll ask for some opening comments. So go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Johnson. I'm the Director of IT at the Maryland Aviation Administration, and that means I have oversight of BWI and Martin State Airport.
I'm Dr. Shar Sample from Marshall University. I also work with their ICS, which is their cybersecurity center. And I teach obviously cybersecurity, but I came in from industry, so I have a bit of a richer background than we typically associate.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Brian Cobb, Chief Innovation Officer for CVG, Cincinnati Northern Kentucky International Airport. That's my day job. IT falls within my realm. For today, actually, I'm representing Aviation ISAC as their board member.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Deppen. I'm the Interim Director of Homeland Security here for the state of Maryland. My role in airport security and cybersecurity lies with critical infrastructure protection and coordination of state assets. And I am here representing the concept of communication being part of a resilient airport.
Hello, my name is Jose Fernandez. I'm a former academic, the opposite route. I took early retirement from academia after almost 20 years as a full professor. I was leading cybersecurity research in IT, OT, and in the last few years, aviation cybersecurity. My post-retirement day job is I'm a full-time airline pilot on an Embraer 195, second generation for Porter Airlines. My nighttime job is I do a bit of consulting in aviation cyber, but also I am the officer commanding of the Cyber Reserve Forces and the Canadian Forces Cyber Command.
Yeah. So I've been looking forward to when Alexis asked me to moderate this panel. I could not believe the expertise that's up here on stage. That differs from what we had last year. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time this morning because it really is a unique perspective. Dr. Fernandez, I'm going to start with you. Opening comments. What we had asked, in the prep sessions, what are the couple of things that you just want to hit the audience square between the eyes on right now on the issue of safety, security, particularly in the airline and airport industry?
Yes, I think when we're talking about safety and security, well, there's a shift, right, from IT and the CIA triad and in our case, much more about integrity and also availability. And then from building what the previous panel said, one, it's what you have, the identification, the assets you have, what's connected to you. But I think there's another dimension to it. There's a lot of stuff that is not connected on the network, but affects operations. And those other components are cyber, right? So they might be, and I'll give you an example. We're getting a lot of emails these days because operations are being affected in the airline. Why? Because the trucks that are IoT enabled, that are emptying the lavs from the airplane are getting hit, okay? And we get these messages, lav unavailable at the airport. Well, that cripples operations, okay? So that's not a connected system, but the cyber system is affected. So beyond interconnectivity, it's online networks. I can scan it, I can see it. Those other IT or IoT systems that are not connected, but are interdependent at the operational level, that's one idea I want to start with.
Yeah, well, one thing, and before I get on the Marshall, I may not realize that CISA recently put out a national advisory with the FBI on gasoline tank gauges. And the fact that there is a deliberate attack vector that is targeting them around the country. I mean, airports, you're sitting on a ton of those. I mean, yeah, so you're right. It's amazing, even the stuff you may not think of every day that potentially could be a vector of attack or a target of attack that's sitting on an airport. So I just want to validate what you're saying, that you may not even know, what is out there that ultimately folks are targeting. Marcia, any opening comments?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway for everyone here is that, we're talking about cybersecurity, we're talking about critical infrastructure, but everything is connected everywhere. And if we're not communicating and sharing intel and threat vectors and everything with one another, if we're not giving situational awareness to one another about what's actually happening at our facility, we are missing a big part of what I consider to be resilience. for airports, for any transportation mode, to be very frank. So that is one of the things that my office is responsible for, is that coordination at the state level of all of our partners to make sure that we are in fact sharing, and then during response, coordinating our efforts.
So one of the things we took as a takeaway from last year is we did not have the aviation ISAC, at the airport 1.0. So thank you for being here and the dual role. Talk to us a little bit from the aviation ISAC perspective. Where can we work with you further to address airport safety and security?
Thank you, Lucian. It actually goes back to what Marcia just said. The purpose of aviation ISAC is the communications piece. And frankly, we're talking about an IT industry that historically doesn't really communicate very, very well through an introversion aspect. So at the end of the day, what is the communication medium that we can share openly and let folks know what is happening in near real time? Add to that essentially what's on the horizon. I think all of us know the speed to market in attack vectors is shocking. So what are we going to do from that perspective in getting communication out as rapidly as we possibly can through not just aviation, but other industry sectors, just as fuel tanks? So pipeline attack equates to something that will ultimately impact an airport. And then we get to our dear friend, John Hopkins in the back, who just ended the last session on resiliency. What are we doing to speed to market in recovery?
Go ahead, Doug. You actually had a comment you wanted to make last session. Did you want to make that now or just some opening comment?
The person offline.
Okay, all right.
So there are actually several things that I want to kind of lead in with. One, we've talked about the interconnectivity of our systems, something that we should keep in mind, because this really has massive ramifications that we don't talk about, are the difference between complex systems and complicated systems. Our systems tend to be complex, and complex systems have unique characteristics that break a lot of the models that we use for our complicated or closed systems. So they are self-organizing, they have tipping points that are nonlinear, very unpredictable. There's like 7 different points. I don't want to spend all my time talking about the 7 points. I'll talk about it offline if anyone wants. But the ramifications for what we're trying to do are huge. So when we talk about doing things like adding AI into the mix here, AI is not designed for complex systems. It works really well in complicated environments. And when we talked at the end of the previous session about how we can do different things to help with get this interconnection and bringing down the workload, AI is good if it's in a nice little constrained environment. Don't put it in a complex environment and expect to get accurate results. The other point I would like to there's 2 other points I want to hit quickly. One is we need standardized measurement. So when we talk about understanding what we have in our systems, not just how the system, what we have, but how it's supposed to actually work and how do you measure that? And the third most important one, knowledge transfer to the younger generation. I'm not young. I'm looking around the room. A lot of us are not. We have to make sure that we get the younger generation as passionate about this as we are.
Well, for me, monitoring and alerting is a really big thing for me. I've always thought that, the computer network has its own life, its own heartbeat. You can hear it hiccup, you can see it cough. So you need to have that monitoring and alerting there. Even if it's just information, I read those every day just to know how my network is going. And with these OT systems now, like I said, most of them are micro-segmented, no one's watching them. You need to have that alerting in there to understand what good traffic is and bad traffic what is.
So following up on that, I mean, we talked about that in the first panel. For any of the panelists, is there anything from the first panel that struck you that you were taking notes on that you really want to follow up on? And you can go ahead if you.
Well, the fire suppression scenario, we actually experienced that last week.
Yeah.
So we had a technician come in. He was doing some maintenance on the system, and he released some of the gas into the data center. So that kicked off all the automatic alerts. The building was evacuated. The HVAC system was shut down. And then that's the data center that has our access control system for the airport.
So that's a bad day for you. That was.
Actually, that was my first day back from a cruise.
Wow.
So I walk in at 7 o'clock in the morning and everybody going, Jeffrey, 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 you know. Luckily, like I say, you have to have your network has to be disparate. So we have several campuses.
Yeah.
So we were able to offload those services for the airport for CCT cameras, door access, off to the other data center. Luckily, it sounded like a bad day, but it really wasn't a bad day today because we had prepared for it.
So there was a question in the previous session, how do you do disaster recovery? So I'm trying to figure out, this was an incident response, not a disaster response, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, so do you feel like I don't know if you did you pull out a response guide and okay, here's how we're going to work on this? I mean, is there lessons learned from that? What we should have had pre-planned that you're going to want to apply in the future?
So yes, so we do have some playbooks. That scenario was not in our playbook. So our team, some of my team members are here. They did an excellent job. They analyzed the situation. They got all they pulled out the call tree, got all the right people involved. They got all of our OT environments are vendor run. So they got all the vendors on site and they were able to get it under control fairly quickly without too much. And luckily the CEO did not know what happened until we told her. So for me, that was a good day.
Yeah. But that brings up a great question about information sharing. I'm going to go off topic here just a little bit, but I think it's good for this panel. I'm not sure. I think you don't want to air dirty laundry, but you do want to share some of the good things that happen.
Yeah.
How do we ultimately build that database or so other airports can take a look at that? Maybe that's something in the realm of the aviation ISAC where we have case studies and there's not that much difference between a case study and a role model. But I think in this case, you didn't have too much of an impact. It's a positive case study. How do we get those out to the other airports so they can learn from that? Is that something that we can work on within the ISAC, or is there another venue that you might want to recommend for getting some of these lessons learned? Because
Absolutely. So the portal access, essentially, any member of the aviation ISAC has portal access. That portal access, again, is in near real time reporting for what is happening in your environment. And again, for us, it's not just an airport. There are airlines, aircraft manufacturers, OEM parts. It's all an ecosystem that's sharing information in real time. And I would take this from a two-tier perspective, wearing those two hats. Number one, it's awareness what's happening in that ecosystem, in that portal around the world at any given point. And then there's the actuality. So this just happened on Monday. Several of our departments started receiving phone calls. Those phone calls were from IT ops requesting VNCs. We are under a phishing attack. And thank goodness, we educated the staff enough to say, that sounds unusual. And frankly, I would say by the grace of God that we got lucky because we're a small entity. Everyone knows everyone. And that doesn't sound like the person from IT ops. So someone called IT to ask, what's going on? Now, tuck that aside, we squashed it. Again, through the goodness of one of our police officers who also is engaged in cyber, decided just randomly to call other regional airports. The same thing was happening in real time at those other airports. They just didn't necessarily broadcast it or figure out, how do we report it? Is it that important? We squashed it. It's okay. Issue done. Well, the issue's not really done. Here's the third tier. Why is this important specifically to our airport? If you're not familiar with CVG, there's not one major cargo operator, there's two. We're the only North American hub with two major air cargo carriers, DHL and Amazon. And for quick perspective, prior to Amazon officially launching, they were already there, but officially launching October 2020, there were 2.5 million attempts on our network. 1 year later, 1 month, 9.2 million attempts on our network, exponentially increased. So then this gets back to Shar's comment. There are complex systems and then there is complexity. We are a complexity ecosystem. Our systems are not tied to Amazon. They're not tied to DHL. However, if the nefarious type wins one for the team on the Black Hat side, what have they done? They've effectively slowed down the airport operations that now impacts commerce of trade, e-commerce. Now we've actually taken a financial hit economically on a domestic scale and an international scale. And oh, by the way, just down the street, about an hour and a half, when I was talking about those regional airports, happens to be another major cargo carrier, Worldport UPS in Louisville. So again, there's this ecosystem complex all along this rail, relatively tight space that is economically viable to these types of, economically vulnerable to these types of attacks.
So that goes from information sharing to potential notification, as
Correct.
far as getting the word out as quickly as possible. I think that's probably something that has to come out of this conference is a recommendation. How do we institutionalize what just happened by accident? And there's a lesson learned, but more importantly, it's something that we need to. There has to be a flash that goes out to every airport, saying, doesn't necessarily say where it happened, just it happened. And for airports to be looking out for that. Is that something we can work on with the Aviation ISAC moving forward, a notification process, or does it exist? Or do we need to create it?
No, 100%. It partially exists. Again, I'll go back to the portal. The portal's there, but it goes back to actually the first round table, which is what the pulse. We all receive alerts. Who's looking at those alerts and who's filtering them to absolutely critical infrastructure? And are we treating airports, specifically like Air Force bases or other air bases, a military construct and a defensive posturing, as opposed to, oh, it's just another landmass that just happens to support aircraft? So we've got to think logically and differently from the perspective of what are we communicating? And again, tiered system. Number one, for this group, the takeaway is what's the single source panel that's basically the heart monitor that's saying uptick. So already what we have systems, you can go to Ookla and see the down system, right? What's operating in a down manner? How do we use that for this ecosystem?
Is it also time too, again, our panel is focused on cyber threats, but tomorrow we're going to be talking kinetic threats. We're seeing an unprecedented rise in kinetic activity, particularly with drones, that threaten both military airports and civilian airports. This is a time to have that notification extended to any kind of incident that ultimately affects the safety and security of an airport. I think that is needed more today than it's ever been in our nation's history, as far as what are the spot threats that are popping up that we need to be paying attention to.
Lucia, don't give it away. Panel team. Sorry. But yes.
I'm so sorry about that. We should have coordinated that. I'm sorry, Dr. Anything to add from your perspective, Dr. Fernandez?
Yeah, just wanted to say that in Canada, there is a Canadian Aviation Cybersecurity Working Group that brings together all of the airports, a lot of the airlines. We're trying to come up with a national level information sharing. And this is above and beyond information sharing that would have international level with Aviation ISAC, which a lot of the members of that group are. And I think to have that at the national and international level is important, but at the regional level as well, because sometimes the dependencies that we're talking about are at the regional level. I'm thinking of energy and utilities and so forth. And I'm talking, in the case of Canada, we have 30 communities in the Arctic that are dependent on aviation for eating, right? The airplanes could stop coming, then people starve now within a few weeks. So that brings another kind of regional element to it. And I think in my image in the United States, it would be similar. So I think that it's not one database to rule them all and in darkness bind them. It's different levels of information sharing on the technical side, on the operational side, on the regional side, because the interdependencies go much beyond those network connectivities.
And we're talking about a sector, but like, for instance, Homeland Security for the state of Maryland. We have a lot going on in this country right now, particularly with the World Cup. And I know Governor Moore is really focused on citizen safety within the state of Maryland. Is there interconnectedness to other activities you're undertaking, Marshall, where we can be taking some of the information you're getting outside the aviation sector, making sure that gets passed down to the airport?
Yeah, and I think it's not just what's happening in North America. I mean, it's what's happening globally, right? I mean, we're impacted by every action that's happening in the Middle East right now as well. So I think one of the things that I would like to get out of this 2 days, is for us to kind of come together and figure out how can we take information, whether it comes in a classified way, an unclassified, how can we take information and kind of pull out what we can use from it and share it around, right? So I can, I've just started in this position 6 months ago. My clearance is in the black hole of DHS somewhere. So wherever you are, SZA, Alan, Jason, if you guys can help me out there, that'd be great. No, I can't.
We'll have Nick here later.
Yeah, maybe we can get. But I can't consume, classified information. But others in here can. But there's part of that information that could be helpful to me to be able to then change our policies and/or our position for a certain incident. And I think that's, the most important thing is that when we communicate, we give people the information that they can then make an informed decision about what they're doing. I'm also a frequent traveler. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'm flying to Punta Cana. So if anybody wants to go in my suitcase, they're free to jump in with me. But my husband actually went to the World Cup game in Boston on Saturday, and it was a lot of logistical, issues around if you've been reading, any of the Reddit or other things around that. But just the airlines and the airports in that Northeast area were just super congested. And then with the storms that came through over the weekend, it just really messed travel up a lot. And those are the kinds of things that people are used to. But what they're not used to is, oh, I'm going to come into this airport. I want to get onto your Wi-Fi because I want to stream a video. And the next thing you know, they've compromised something within your system, and they didn't even know that they had something, on their device. So, those are the kinds of things that keep me up at night.
So another credit to TAC, Philip and Alexis, the fact that you're able to get Nick here this afternoon. We'll see if he shows. I'm hoping he will. You're talking about an organization, CISA, that has got their hands full right now.
Yeah.
They're having to manage basically a nationwide Tier 1 event, and with the World Cup being here. So there's a lot on the plate. And
yeah.
At Fenway, did you not see them show up at Fenway?
My husband has decided that Scotland is our next place we need to go because they know how to party. I mean, these guys were not messing around.
We're definitely off topic.
Topic though.
Doctor, I know you wanted to say something a minute ago. Yeah. Yep, absolutely, yeah.
New ways to, new mechanisms for sharing our information on threats and things that go wrong. Does it make sense to also consider sharing information on common things and how they can go right? How do you measure that?
That it did go.
Yeah.
There wasn't an I'm sorry, didn't see me speak up. That's a positive case. That's a role model. That's why I was suggesting, how do we get the word out on what you did well, what your team did well? I think that's what you're focusing on.
I'm focusing on that and actually like not just what your team did well, but really drilling it down so that, because we have a lot of similar systems across different environments beyond the airport, right? So we can say, well, if I'm doing this sort of information where I'm allowing free access to my network, what does that activity look like on my network? And how can I say, this is what a known good behavior of this network looks like?
You were going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to also bounce to something that was said in the other panels and on the governance and how it applies. And you mentioned safety at the beginning of the panel. Two things. There is legislation that you might be familiar with that has come out of Europe, which is Part IS, which is interesting, and we don't have anything like that in Canada, nothing in the States yet, which is pretty much a governance framework for anything that touches aviation. Okay, that is critical to aviation. So of course the airlines, of course the airports, but also the catering companies, the fueling companies. If you are part of that supply chain, you are subject now to these cybersecurity standards, right? Governance is a double-edged sword, as we were saying earlier. But one of the things that is coming out of that effort is that people who never thought they would be part of a cybersecurity standard now are having to at least do some due diligence and declare themselves as, yes, we are using the systems, and the higher level people in the cyber supply chain are being aware, right? The airlines are now being aware that the catering companies actually have IT systems that are in the cloud and how that could affect their operations. So that at least the mapping of who's out there and who has cyber or who has OT or IoT is actually being a very positive side effect of that. And I think that's something that we need to understand. I think in a North American context, we don't have that regulatory pressure yet, but there is a lot that's coming out of that. We should keep an eye on that. And International Organization of Aviation, ISAC and IATA are sort of sharing the lessons learned, right? That's the other thing, the lessons learned, the best practices. This is the other part of the information sharing. The other part of it also is that we live in a world where in aviation, especially on the aeronautical side, safety has been critical for the last 30, 40 years. And a lot of standards on the technological side have developed to sustain resilience. I mean, there are on the aircraft I fly, there are 5 different electrical buses, 3 different hydraulic systems, 2 different avionics space with different buses and 4 master controllers. And they are very good standards coming out of the various standard committees, RTCA and ARINC and so forth, about how to build and continue to operate with that resiliency built in. I think that we're not quite there yet in terms of IT and OT cybersecurity. And I actually was pleasantly surprised in the last few years since I stopped becoming a professor. I've had plenty of time to read and to actually train myself in going to professional trainings. So as a cybersecurity professional and researcher has been working on this for 20 years and going to workshops on avionics and aerospace resilience and safety, it's like, wow, you know, in some sense, we're behind, right? In some sense, we still have to educate I think the cyber people still have to educate the aviation community about a lot of what's going on in the world and sharing intelligence and threats. But there's a lot for us to learn with humility from the aviation and aeronautical space in terms of they've got resiliency down pat, right? Let's try to bring the best of both worlds together.
So I wish I had known and had you speak last week. So we had a cyber safety summit, which we focused on the difference between security and safety. And from our perspective, as engineers, whether we're designing a plane, an airport, a car, we need to focus on a unique profession, cyber safety engineering, which is different from electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, structural engineering. An engineering profession that has a designer of record, has a professional engineering license, and has a professional liability to address cyber safety in whatever we're building. I think that's where we need to go. Governance can only take us so far, but we as a globe, as an engineering profession, need to recognize cyber safety engineering as a distinct and unique aspect of any type of human engineering, particularly when you have human public safety at risk. So I love what you just said because it ties into where I think you're right. We have a North American gap on addressing and deliberately designing cyber safety to include all the technologies represented in the next room that ultimately want to be spec'd into that project. And there's no electrical engineer, mechanical engineer that knows those technologies. It will be a cyber safety engineer that knows that what needs to be put in. So it's no longer the asset owner. The airport owner says, hey, build me a cyber safe building. It will be the engineer's responsibility to bring that asset owner a cyber safe building. Just like we ground electrical systems, we put in safe HVAC systems. The owner doesn't need to ask for it. The engineer's responsibility has a responsibility to actually design that in. So that is what I think we need more than anything else in North America. Go ahead.
Let me throw this one out. Anybody here from the insurance industry? Yeah, I didn't think so. Rhetorical.
We had an insurance panel in our summit.
Yeah, so you just brought up professional liability, and it goes back to the cons. Frankly, the conversation that we need to have, and one of the takeaways potentially from this event is how do we start pulling in the insurance industry? Because there's an aspect that says, oof, if I report this publicly, does that expose us from an insurance aspect? And am I going to see my rates skyrocket? Now am I responsible in some form of potential litigation further on down the road? So CrowdStrike, I think, may have had an implication for those of us that remember. But again, that's realistic. There are individuals immediately of, oh, do we want to report that so fast? And then it's as Jose was sharing, it's the humility that says, well, wait a minute. We owe it to our community to do better and to share what's going on so that they can avoid and or improve, as Jeffrey's team did, of jumping on something rather rapidly through experience. It's that just continual education aspect of live and learn, live and learn, live and learn. And how are we pushing it to the next generation that says, this is what we didn't do so well. This is where we can improve better. And then from an aviation ISAC aspect, I would just close on the fact of that's the beauty of ISAC, is that it's multiple industries that also, it's not just siloed to aviation, it's reaching out to the other ISACs that are saying, well, what's going on in your neck of the woods? Because ultimately, if you think about it from the airport side of the house, where TSA frankly got involved in doing the cybersecurity inspections and checks is really, it started with the oil and gas pipeline shutdown. Of one thing led to another of, oh, if our pipelines are vulnerable, then aviation's probably vulnerable. We need to get on that.
And that was Colonial, 2021. I think
Bingo.
yep, absolutely. By the way, you just hit a fantastic recommendation for Defend the Airport 3.0, and that has had to have an insurance, an underwriter panel that can represent the airport industry, or at least underwriters that serve the airports. So I think that's a fantastic idea to see how we drive.
Well, and it goes back to safety again. And I'll close on this. FAA shows up, three individuals in February sitting in our office. And their very first comment was, usually when 3 FAA representatives are sitting in your office, that's not a good sign. Have no fear, we come in peace.
Yeah.
The gist was, we're still the only North American airport at this point to have fully autonomous equipment operating around the operational airfield, around aircraft and personnel. We've been doing this since 2018. They came to us to say, look, some of our notices inadvertently have slowed progress down. We don't want to be the individuals that are slowing progress down, but our biggest concern is you're so far ahead. Help us understand where's the human in the loop and how vulnerable are these things to attack? And what are you doing to try to prevent that? Because as soon as something goes out onto the active runway and potentially damages an aircraft or worse, then it's game over. It's going to dramatically slow down our just normal day-to-day operations and the future of where we go with automation. So again, it's complex. What are we doing to work together?
I'm tracking time. What do we got right now as far as time for questions from the audience? We're over time. Do you have anything on? You have any online? Okay, just a few quick lightning round questions. You'll be around to answer questions from the audiences. Go ahead. Okay, how many are InfraGard members that are connected to the FBI database? Yeah. I know when I tried to join InfraGard, they wanted my social security number and I did not give it to them, and then they got hacked. So I just wanted to make sure. No, serious, this is what happened. So InfraGard, any exposure on the audience, from the audience to InfraGard? Any comment you want to make to that? Okay. All right. So I think that's something we probably need to bring. Hey, tell that person to come to the conference and talk about InfraGard next year. All right.
Flight operation, ground systems. How do you evaluate the current pace and effectiveness of our transition toward resilient alternative PNT architecture in light of rapidly evolving spoofing?
Yeah, that's an entirely different panel. I know spoofing is a huge problem right now. So Dr. Vanette, if you want to take that real quick.
Yeah, so I'm quite aware there's a new generation of GPS receivers that are coming online that will address partly or mitigate the threat. There's also, but as a pilot, I'm a strong believer in the pilot being the first line of defense. Some airlines have started, especially those that are more affected in flying into the Middle East and more affected zones, have started to develop a cadre of pilots who are aware of this and know the SOPs. And I've just seen some of the OEM manufacturers coming up with GPS spoofing procedures. So it's about resilience, yeah. It's about deploying new technology, but also deploying new procedures to be able to deal with it. And by the way, airports are not immune to that. We had a terrible accident in LaGuardia having to do with ADS-B and so forth. And ADS-B is as vulnerable to spoofing as GPS. So I think at the airport level, we need to think about how does that affect operations on the ground and situational awareness by controllers and trucks and everything else.
I was going to ask you for last comments, but I think I'm going to get punched by Alexis if I go any longer. Okay, just a final lightning round, less than 30 seconds. What do you want to leave the audience with? I'll start with you.
I work closely with Donald Bowie. Me and him on the same line. We work closely almost every day. Know your environment, know your assets, get a clear insight into those vendor networks. I'm going through contract negotiations now, and they will push back about, having IDS, disaster recovery, but you push for those things because those things will bring you down.
Yeah.
First question to ask yourself, is my problem a complex problem or is it a complicated problem? Okay, second, how am I going to share my knowledge make sure that I bring up the younger generation? We've got to go beyond just doing internships. We want to really get them embedded in what we're doing. And the third one, of course, is how do we put everything on an even plane?
Get involved. Piggybacking off of Shar, essentially what we've been in process of doing is creating a digital twin of our network and handing that over to our university partners and letting them teach students in real time what's happening in a real live environment as opposed to book learning.
So you're a godsend because we didn't even talk digital twins. I think the future of our country, we have to digital twin our airspace. We have to digital twin our ground operation and allow AI to enable us to create a more safe environment by digital twinning the system. So
sign me up.
I think, so number one, make sure you're patching all your vulnerabilities. I mean, the simple things, our human persons are still our biggest threat and still our biggest vector to get the bad people into our system. Number two, creation of policies around some of this. We are woefully behind, at least in Maryland, for drone policies for how we are going to mitigate, detect, and then prosecute drones. And I know that that is going to become something for airports that is going to be a bigger and bigger issue. And then lastly, again, I think communication is key, sharing information. Don't be afraid to, I know you don't want to share your dirty laundry, but it's okay to talk about things that have happened and, how you overcame it. And then lastly, I'll leave you with, to be resilient means to be able to continue to provide services to your clients regardless of what kind of systems you have at your fingertips. So how can you continue to deliver your services if your systems go offline?
Dr. Fernandez, bring us home.
Right, nothing to add, just a shameless plug. I will be joining Embry-Riddle University as a full professor in September. There are 3 reasons that I want to do that. And number one is Dr. Sample. I realize after all this time that what we need to do more than anything else is train humans. And that's why I'm going back to academia. I realized how critical that was and I missed it. I missed the teaching. Second of all, there's a lot of research to be done. And one of the main things we're going to be doing is developing digital twins for aviation cybersecurity within the Center for Aviation Resilience and Security. And the third is one of the things that I'm really interested, but at the same time worried about, is about that gap in our in what we're talking about here, which is the whole thing about advanced air mobility, drones, and we need to bring in that community. We need to make them see before they make critical mistakes what we've learned, right? And right now, that communication is not quite established.
So believe it or not, we did not do a lot of prior rehearsal coordination. It was an honor to share the stage with each of you. Please come back next year. Your expertise is invaluable. It was a great conversation. One thing I want to leave as a final thought, Alexis, and we need the help of Wanda. We need to get Task Force 401 here next year. Please, Dr. Jones-Heath, if you can help us, because that is the organization with the Department of War that's looking at counter drone. They are focused on 5 airfields right now, and I think that would be a critical addition for expertise here to how to handle that particular threat. So thank you very much, and give a round of applause to the audience. That's it. Thank you so much.
Good job. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. I hope. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, panelists and Lucian. Those were 2 great panels. We are at a break and then going into our breakout sessions. So although it's all in the agenda booklet, let me just tell you exactly what's up at 11 o'clock. So
Thank you.
good news is we're back on time.
Thank you.
We have 3 concurrent breakout sessions.
Alumni.
This room where we are right now, the Hamilton, is going to be Horizon 3. Their title session is Defending the Airport with the World's Best AI Hacker, Node Zero. So you can stay in here for that breakout session. Breakout session number 2 is Bureau Veritas. Title, it's a tabletop exercise, crisis simulation workshop, navigating cyber threats in critical infrastructure. That is in the Vaughn. That is, as I'm pointing, the room that is right parallel to this room, and you can ask anybody to direct you. And third, our breakout session with, actually, I said it backwards, I'm sorry. It's breakout session number 1 with Yonald Sherry, our CTO, and his title doing airport infrastructure preparedness and awareness, and has some vendor highlights that he's going to be showcasing during the session. So that is in the airport area. So just exit this room and continue straight back. You will walk right into it. And then at the end of that, you'll roll right into lunch. Okay. Are we doing this one? Okay. All right, welcome back. I am very pleased to be able to introduce our keynote for our afternoon session, Mr. Nick Anderson, Acting Director and Deputy Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. So we are so thrilled that he has taken time out of his schedule to be able to support and be here at the Defend the Airport Collaborative. So welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Thank you all for taking the time. Thank you for letting me join you for for a little bit. Our work at CISA has continued over the last several years, and certainly over the course of the last year since I've been there, we've really doubled down on our focus on control systems in our OT environment, and sort of the underpinnings of what is it that helps us to safeguard the American way of life. And I think about just thematically the types of things y'all been going through today and the kinds of conversations that I know that you've been having. Our transportation sector is a terrific example of the rapid transformation we've seen over the last couple of decades of modernization and technology integration, where these flying miracle boxes that we strap ourselves into and then take off are essentially just computers with wings. I mean, it's just a miracle of evolution to see, the Wright brothers to where we are today, and the types of transportation evolution that we've seen, with smaller craft and the availability that that's going to provide to people over the next couple of years, and sort of the democratization of air travel and just how exceedingly cheap it is now, and we see the crushing volume that we experience, and is of course highlighted when we have things like a DHS shutdown. Contact your legislators, make sure it doesn't happen again. But we see that the crush of just impact that has within our economy, and that's just thinking about commercial passenger travel. That's not even thinking about the movement of goods and the underpinnings of the rest of our economy that go into both international good movement and domestic goods movement. So, I mean, it really is a small miracle every single day as we continue to engage in the support that the aviation subsector provides. Oh, y'all cut the thing off. Thank God. I was going to get a migraine standing in front of that light. It really is just a small miracle that continues to play out every single day, and the impact that it has, not just on our economy, but the impact that it has on protecting our nation's defense overall, and the air power as a significant component to that, both manned and unmanned moving forward. But it also provides for a tremendous amount of attack surface for our adversaries to take advantage of. Every single day, we continue to see it play out, in particular in our control systems environment. The types of opportunities that were provided for then become the exact risk that our adversaries seek to take advantage of. So CISA, I can't even tell you the exact date, but go on CISA.gov. It'll be right there with all of our other fantastic products we provide. We provided some highlights of Iranian threat actor activity over the last couple of months, targeting things like PLCs that were open and available on the internet, and that low-hanging fruit opportunity it provides for our adversaries to be able to seek to not just target technical infrastructure for the sake of targeting technical infrastructure. They are seeking to have a significant psychological impact on the American public, on our way of life, to introduce doubt and sow, seeds of fear in our economy. They are hoping to fundamentally change the risk calculus of, can we trust these things? Can we trust that, clean drinking water is going to come out of the tap when we need it? Can we trust that we're going to be able to come into a room and flip the lights on? Can we trust that the projector is going to work for the 50 slide deck presentation that I'm going to give you all in a few minutes? There will be no slides. Oh yeah, it definitely is. I hate slides. That'll be the one part of the technology ecosystem that I allow to fall flat, and we will not rescue them whatsoever. But the impact and the opportunity that we then have as operators in this space, either as critical infrastructure owner operators, as cyber defenders, as network defenders, as people that are seeking to build better, more secure, products through the design cycle, the opportunity we have is a tremendous burden as well. We are all gifted the opportunity to work in this space, but it is also just a tremendous burden on all of us. We know the worst that can happen. So at this point, we have to really reframe our thinking to be, are we doing the most that we can do to be able to, with a clear conscience, look our families in the eye and say, I knew what could have happened, and I did absolutely everything within my power in order to secure us for the future. My analogy that I use with our team, which is perhaps more appropriate for a defend the airport crowd and us thinking about aviation and that subsector in particular, is I don't want CISA employees. I don't want my friends within the interagency. I don't want my friends within industry to have to wake up on a bad day and reflect and think this is what it felt like to be a TSA employee on September 12th. We are heading towards that moment where we're going to see a significant cyber impact that impacts our civilian critical infrastructure, just because that's the way that the world is changing. Civilian critical infrastructure is no longer off limits. And in many ways, every single one of us are operating on the front lines of a war that just hasn't been declared yet. That is just a truth that we have to live with, and it has to reshape our thinking and reshape the priorities that we have. For us, that means redoubling down on our hiring efforts and putting a lot of our money where where we're saying the priority really lies. That means redoubling our efforts to put staff back out in the field for us. With our cybersecurity advisors, our protective security advisors, our state cybersecurity coordinators, being able to interact with people on the ground in the communities they live with, and being able to engage as stakeholders in a significant way. It means initiatives like the ones we just launched within the last month or so, like CI Fortify, which is all about a focus on resilience and being able to operate in a disconnected manner, and being able to understand that there are essential services we deliver every single day that have to be able to withstand the disruptions that we know will come in 2027 and beyond through the targeting of our civilian critical infrastructure. We all need to be able to think through, how is it that I could operate without telecommunications infrastructure? How is it that I can operate without the data center that's dependent on water sector? How is it that I can operate, if we see a transportation sector disruption? We have to be able to riddle those things out and game those things out today, so we have a better understanding of the potential for cascading impacts amongst our space. Because again, the disruption will happen. We are going to see a mass scale disruptive event, and our public is exceedingly generous when it comes to restoration of services after a natural disaster. We see a wildfire happens, a major ice storm happens, a hurricane happens, a tornado affects a community. People are very, very understanding with saying everybody's doing the best they can. We can see the damage. We can see this thing. It was a God event. We have no idea. Nothing could have been done outside of shoring ourselves up and making us more resilient. Nothing could be done. We just have to give the linemen times to go out there and work on the lines. We have to give crews with chainsaws opportunity to go clear roads. We have to give After a massive snowstorm, give the airport time to be able to clear the runways to restore to safe operation and get a much de-icer, out there on the craft. They are not going to have the same level of forgiveness for our community. Then nobody is going to look at us and say, it's fine, I completely understand. You computery folks didn't know this could have happened, and it's a nation state actor, and that sounds really bad and it sounds really serious. We're gonna be totally forgiving of the fact that that nobody could log on to Amazon for 24 hours, and I couldn't get my monster, delivered to the house within 48 hours of me clicking order, because my body will physically fall apart at this point if I don't. We're just not gonna have that same level of forgiveness, and that's just for the small things. We've seen it recently when we look at cyber incidents that weren't even cyber incidents. Things that were just IT disruptions, like our Cloudflare outage recently. We see the Verizon outage that happened recently. That had a real tangible impact on people. That had people wondering, how am I going to contact my kids? Because I use a particular app that tracks the location for a family. That's how we coordinate pickup. We're all on Verizon. We've all got the same mobile plan. I need to be able to text them to coordinate, who's picking them up after practice. I need to be able to pay a bill. I need to be able to contact a caregiver who's staying at home with my parents because I'm at work during the day. And there were just real significant impacts that happen with just things that are a couple hours of disruption for an IT event, not even a cyber event. And again, the American public will not forgive us for not being resilient enough. So for us, I think that leads us to just ruthless prioritization of what is most critically important. And for CISA, we've taken that opportunity to coordinate with our interagency friends, with our industry friends, around lines of effort supporting public health and safety, continuity of our nation's economy, national security, and defense critical infrastructure. Trying to get a good idea of, that's our blue space view. What is it that we think is most important? How do we align those things to the functions they provide for that are most important? And then aligning that with layering in a red space view as well, of going back with the last 5 or 6 years of subcompartment reporting, working with our interagency colleagues, and getting a good understanding of where's the adversary spending its time. We know what we think is important. Do they think that that same company is important, or that same asset or that same function is important? Where are they spending their R&D time? Where are they spending their dwell time? Where are they pre-positioning on infrastructure? And that gives us a good picture of, this is maybe where we should start for purposes of developing joint work plans with each one of those entities to get to a measurable level of resilience at an asset-based level. Because my critique on the way that we've done some of this in the past on the government side is we've looked at somebody and said, congratulations, Lucien LLC is the most important energy company that is out there. Lucien, good luck, go with God, please make yourself more secure. That is not helpful. We instead need to be able to say, here you are, important company. This is the function you're providing support for. Maybe it's a military installation, maybe it's a hospital, maybe it's a data center that's providing for a lot of credit card, processing, data, whatever it might be. Here's the function you specifically support. Now let's have a conversation about which assets, what are your real crown jewels and what are the specific assets that support that? And how can we have an integrated conversation about all the elements of our critical infrastructure providers that support those essential functions at an asset-based level? When we start doing that, that gets us to an actual tangible attack surface that we can manage in a realistic and reasonable way, and we can make some real investments around, whether that is state and local cyber grant program, whether it's industry investments themselves, whether it's looking at that capital improvement cycle that companies have to work within, or the people that need to go to public utility commissions or state corporation commissions because they're regulated entities to be able to get a rate adjustment, whatever it might be. That gives us something tangible, not just, oh my gosh, I'm an important company, I need to secure everything everywhere all the time. But that also gets us to a point where we have to be able to address the opposite and say, maybe I am a major financial institution. I might need to build in a little bit of customer resilience over the long term to being able to tolerate some of these disruptions, and saying that bank location that you always go to cash your check because you're getting a hard copy check and you just don't like using the mobile app, that bank location may be down for a couple of weeks. That ATM that you use may be down for a couple of weeks, and that's okay. Your money is still there. Your money is still secure. There are alternate means. Might be more inconvenient for you to go one town over to our other branch location, but that's okay. We as a society expect a high degree of availability, though, And again, some of that is just larger mental shifts that we're going to have to engage in as a broader community, in particular for elements like the transportation sector. There is zero tolerance right now for transportation disruptions, none whatsoever. And it's not just limited to aviation. It's our maritime subsector, same exact thing. We saw how it played out during COVID when we started to see disruptions at port locations. We started to see disruption of movement of goods. We started to see disruptions on the capacity that we could have for passengers moving back and forth. It doesn't matter. There is zero tolerance right now for those disruptions. So we have to start, having a really hard conversation about where can we put our resources in the smartest way possible to really buy down some risk. And that doesn't mean buying a new shiny product. It doesn't mean having more broadly available awareness training. It means making some really tough decisions right now that are going to make us all exceedingly uncomfortable for the next decade plus while we're having a larger critical infrastructure resilience conversation in this country. So I know that we're going to do some questions as well, and I'm going to ramble an awful lot because somebody's going to give me an opening to ramble about things I want to. So I'm going to pause really quickly and we'll start doing some of the questions. And otherwise, I'm just going to keep dragging us down a rabbit hole of here is our deep dark hole of critical infrastructure.
Sure, hold on.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and your comments. Sounds like you take the mission extremely seriously and you went into a lot of detail about how that mission needs to be accomplished. But you are a successor to a CISA director who was vilified for telling the truth about election security. You're part of a cabinet department that has a bad reputation right now for other reasons. And you're part of an administration that a year ago took a chainsaw to effective government services. So my question is, how are you going to accomplish that mission in that environment?
So I think we've got a tremendous amount of support for CISA and its mission right now. I think if you look at President Trump's national cybersecurity strategy, every element short of cost imposition that leads to offensive action is a CISA mission area. Whether it is securing critical and emerging technology, whether it is looking at opportunities for securing and modernizing federal networks, our critical infrastructure partners, the workforce investments that we're making. And, Secretary Mullen has been highly supportive of CISA and its mission, has been very engaged, whether it's just been in general threat briefings or engagement with our critical infrastructure partners. And for us, for anybody who's willing to come over here and work in the CISA mission, we've got 329 vacancies we're hiring against right now, with a goal of being able to get to 180 tentative job offers, which for those of you who've gone through the federal stuff before, that means everything short of you getting your security clearance in the door and going and doing your fun drug tests. We've got a goal of having 180 of those issued by the end of this month. So we are rapidly moving forward to build CISA back into the organization that we know that it needs to be and be able to meet those mission gaps that are present within the environment right now. We've tried to focus that first and foremost on our operational divisions, like our cybersecurity division, our infrastructure security division, those programs that we have that touch a lot of this community and provide a lot of those services. And of course, our field forces, our folks that are operating out in the field that I mentioned earlier, our cybersecurity advisors, our protective security advisors, our state cybersecurity coordinators, that are really the operational face of the agency. They're the ones that when the rubber meets the road and we start talking about vulnerability assessments and we start talking about tabletop exercises in communities and engagements directly with those owner operators, engagements with state and local governments, they're really where a lot of that happens. I think we've got a tremendous amount of support for that. And I think we've got a tremendous amount of bipartisan support to be able to continue to push those things forward. But it's not, you asked the question about CISA, and I think it's a broader question than just CISA. CISA has a lot of different roles that we fulfill. We're the nation's civilian cyber defense agency. We're the national coordinator for critical infrastructure security and resilience. We're the nation's risk advisor. And for a lot of us, I think where we've made a mistake in the past is looking at it and saying, here's a specific problem set. CISA, you're the cyber folks or the critical infrastructure folks, you go solve it. That's never what CISA was intended to be. We're not intended to be the absolutely everything to everyone all the time agency. When we start looking at that national coordinator role, that might mean me going and looking over at energy and saying, Department of Energy, I need you to come in, and here's where we can use your unique authority or your great relationship that you've got, or FBI or NSA or EPA or Department of Transportation or FAA or whomever it might be. It really is about being the unifier to be able to leverage all of the US government's resources and all of our authority to be able to accomplish a mission. I think that's going to be a significant focus for us going forward.
Okay.
I have a very easy and a simple question for you. As the acting CISA director, what is your plan to implement the OMB AIM 2107? The deadline already passed almost a year now, and which has direct impact to the national cybersecurity in general and the OT security as well.
So you're gonna have to remind me because I'm not good with numbers. Which one's the
That's
21?
the OMB memo directing all federal agencies to implement IPv6 only policy. The deadline was 80%, minimum 80% last September.
Yeah, it's, you know, the interesting thing, I'm going to answer your question, but I'm answering it a little bit more broadly because I told y'all, you were going to give me an opportunity to ramble, so I'm going to ramble. Yeah, one of the interesting things, because I used to be at OMB and I was in the federal CIO's office where we were doing things like these MMOs going out. And for those of you that have happy lives and don't know what that is, OMB is divided essentially into two halves. You know, there's the B side, deals with the budget, run by PADS, and you know they own the budget books that go as the president's budget request to the Hill. Then there's the M side, and that is like everything else. So that's where your Office of Federal Procurement Policy sits, and your Office of the Federal CIO, and all of the sort of C-level functions that we think about across government. And OFCIO helps to coordinate things like technical direction, like the IPv4 to IPv6 transition, which are then largely just ignored by the federal interagency. That V4 to V6 transition was one of the first ones that I had the opportunity to get briefed on when I went to OMB. And I was, my first question was, wait, how old is the guidance that said you need to start making a V4 to V6 transition? And we just don't necessarily do a great job of making sure that these management direction memos are then reflected in people's budget priorities, which that is the actual reflection of priorities, reflected in their budget, and then they actually affect the change. So I think for us, much more broadly than just the V6 transition, we are getting a lot more hands-on and a lot more tactical with our federal agency partners on the types of technology transition they should be making, which is the reason why we had to issue another BOD recently, I want to say it was last fall, on like end of life, end of service, edge device risk, to be able to essentially get a little bit more prescriptive and say, okay, you CIOs and executive departments and agencies, you manage your own risk, you operate your own IT environments, but you are making risk decisions which are no longer okay for the wider federal enterprise. So we're getting a little bit more prescriptive in that way and saying, no, you can't run these end of life edge devices at the edge. And I think V6 transition and V6 first is going to be a big part of that. And Greg Barbaccia, the federal CIO, is doing a tremendous amount of work in that way as well, and really trying to operationalize the federal CIO Council and the federal CISO Council to get them out of just being a policy-focused organization and sort of a let's talk about it for a year and build some consensus organization to a real tactical set of implementers on some of those elements.
Maybe a new member is in place.
Don't tell me we need more new memos. No, now you're trying to make me sad.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for making the time to come out and talk with us today. Really appreciate it.
Hello. Oh.
I just need to speak up, right? Sir, thank you again for making time to come out and talk with us today. I really appreciate it. I've seen the reporting from yourself on the 329 priority hires. I've also seen the Secretary Mullen number of 600. And thank you for sharing, the time frame of 100 plus so of those in the next short amount of time. Interested in hearing your thoughts on the strategy for that, and if if government civilian hires aren't getting you where you need to be, any thoughts on opening the apertures to FFRDCs, to UARCs, maybe into contractor personnel? Over.
Yeah, thanks. I think for us, we're going to continue okay, I'm going to complain first before I actually answer your question. It's really hard for us to do anything involving either a contract strategy that involves just traditional services contractors or FFRDCs or UARCs or anything else out there when we don't actually get a budget from the Hill. That makes it exceptionally hard when I've got less than half a fiscal year to be able to go out and spend a multi-billion-dollar agency budget in a responsible way. Not to mention just sort of the compounding impact that happens there, where we're looking at contracts that are expiring, that because some of it's not accepted activity, we can't go and reward some of those contracts during the period of a shutdown. And we've got an awful lot of lapses that are out there, and then we've got a lot of, especially small to mid-sized contractors that are negatively affected in a significant way during the period of a shutdown, because they can keep invoicing all they want to, but the people that actually process the invoices and pay them so they aren't continuing to have to go dig into lines of credit and accrue interest and everything else, they're not accepted. So nobody's there to pay the invoice. So we've got an awful lot of cleanup to do on that side. But yes, we're going to continue to, leverage to the best of our ability our FFRDC and UARC friends and our contracting friends to be able to make sure that they're in the mix. That provides, there's just a good sort of resource mix of when is it great to be able to hire a Fed? When do we need some more rapid application of, inside the loop of federal hiring where we can use, contracted support? And in a lot of places, like where is some of that niche expertise that we need to take advantage of that is not necessarily going to lend itself to coming in and solving the problem as a Fed, or it's not an ideal environment for that person to leave wherever they're at to go to use federal support.
Yeah, sorry.
Hello, thank you for being here today, answering our questions. A question on, you were getting to the point where you said CISA is going to move towards a more prescriptive approach going forward, perhaps maybe closer to an FCC type airworthiness, type of federal FAA airworthiness directive. Looking at Europe, they have created the Cyber Resilience Act, CRA. And in that case, they've taken put some teeth into legislation that says if you do not do these things, you will be fined X dollars per item per day. And I've often asked the question of government officials, do you see that as applicable in the US? Do you see any kind of thinking around those lines? Or perhaps in the US, there may be more of a market approach that says, rather than the stick, there may be a carrot out there that says, if you comply with our critical directives, there may be tax incentives or other incentives for companies that are able to do that. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of different communities of interest that we pulled together, in particular with our OEM friends. And we always get a tremendous amount of support from them when we start talking about things like secure by design concepts, or do we need to have things like SBOMs and the like, and how do we generate longer term resilience within the supply chain? But I think that only gets after part of the problem, because I can have OEMs that build equipment all day long, as secure as they want to. If they hand it to some person in the middle as an integrator, who is then not integrating it in the right way, or not implementing it in the right way, or we've got somebody who's trying to do site acceptance testing on it, and they're like, yeah, that's cute that they want the alarms configured that way. We configure them this way. This is our operational procedure. This is how we run things. Then it's not gonna matter. So for some of it, I think it's yes, I think the OEM part of conversation is part of it. Do I think that we're going to take a much more significant regulatory approach like our EU colleagues have? I don't see that on the horizon. We've got a couple of new initiatives that we're getting ready to roll out within the next week on how we focus on industry collaboration and how we bring these stakeholder groups together. So again, second plug for it. Keep your eyes peeled to CISA.gov. Lots and lots of cool stuff comes out on there, and you don't have to look at my picture at all. So we've got some ways that we're going to be bringing in the OEM community in sort of a focused conversation there. One of my critiques on the way that we did business in the past was we would have things like our IT sector coordinating council. And that kind of became the catch-all everything council. We're going to talk about OT. Now, closest thing we can get to is the IT. So go jam it into the IT conversation. We're going to talk about subsea cables. Seems IT-ish. Maybe it's comms. Let's just go jam it in there. Trying to take a little bit more of a nuanced approach to saying, this is a specific conversation we need to have with a specific set of stakeholders. Let's pull them together for a conversation, to hear from them about what we can be doing to help set the right conditions for them to be successful in the environment. There's just some like real world operational challenges that we have to be able to meet, like things like warranty visibility and support is a good example. If we are saying we are on the front lines of a war that has not yet been declared, you need to be able to operate in a disconnected way and potentially, in a denied communications way. I need you, essential services provider, to think about how you would operate without telecommunications connectivity. Well, that's great. Right until the point that you realize that OEM ABC over here has a contractual stipulation that says you have to maintain your connectivity to me 100% of the time, all the time. Otherwise, it's going to invalidate your warranty if you're going to continue to operate. So we've just got some hard challenges we've got to be able to work through that aren't even just the technical challenges, but start to get to the business model challenges within the OEM community and what that actually means for owner operators in a significant way. But I think first and foremost, we want to be able to partner in a way that is going to be logical and straightforward and is going to ease the burden wherever possible on the owner operators to not to have SME level technical expertise in every single product and product type that they are operating in order to be able to operate in a secure way.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here and for your comments. Really appreciate it. Just rather than questions, actually two requests of you and CISA specifically. And the first one is prioritize the timely sharing of actionable intelligence information. There have been times in the past where CISA may have information, but refuse to utilize one-time read-ins, which is something that your predecessor NPPD used to do. And then secondly, encourage CISA to serve in a coordinating role, because airports have a myriad of federal requirements imposed by various agencies as it pertains to cyber. And there's very little coordination. I was even told by a department representative not too long ago that they have a challenge keeping all the requirements straight. So that would be really helpful, particularly when you have certain requirements that are imposed on airports that are very resource intensive, but do very little to mitigate risk, right? So there were requirements that came out not too long ago that said, okay, airports, identify your critical systems and then implement mitigation measures. Great initiative, clearly performance-based, but then the agency turned right around and said, no. The systems you identified as critical are not critical. These are the systems that are critical. Well, who better than an airport to know what their critical systems are? So just appreciate your help in that regard.
Well, yeah, a government bureaucrat, obviously. I mean, we're all knowing. I don't need owner operator input. I mean, come on. So yeah, your point's well taken. We have a couple thousand people in the both the state and local and industry clearance program that we maintain at CISA, and our sector-based colleagues and some of our law enforcement colleagues and others also have a tremendous amount of clearances that they hold for people. But that's really just the first step. So where we've tried to take a little bit of a different approach the last couple of months is, again, like focused conversations with stakeholders with a focused amount of actionable intelligence to be able to say, here is specifically what we're seeing, and here's how it pertains specifically to your sector or subsector. You tell us, what do you think this means to you? Now that process takes a little bit longer than we'd like, just because of if I've got an interagency partner, within the IC, they're the originating control. We got to get it down to a tear line where they're comfortable with it. We got to make sure sometimes that we have reps from those agencies in the room. There's hurdles to jump through. But we're continuing to try to jump through them. And the way that we're trying to tackle that up front is, again, those like focused conversations with smaller sets of stakeholders to specifically present them with, here's the intel and what we see the adversary doing and maneuvering within the space. So all great points. And if you're willing to narc on who that department person was that you talked to, I'll make sure they're appropriately educated on all the different requirements. But it's but it really has been fantastic. So I've just being able to travel post shutdown the last couple of months and being able to go see our folks that are out in the regions, because CISA has 10 different regions, each one's led by a regional director. Being able post shutdown to be able to go out and actually see some of those folks and see again the tremendous relationships that they have. One of my recent ones was going up to our Region 1 office and being able to go see the relationship that they've got with Massport, there at Logan, and being able to see just how are they actioning things that are coming in partnership with the federal government, and B, what does that actually mean in practice for their operation, and where can we reduce some of that friction. And I think the harmonization of the approach that we take, whether it's in regulatory matters or it's just in again, how do we operationalize this and make it relevant, being able to make that as frictionless as possible to be able to, again, get our intel and get our operations focused back out in the field where those relationships actually, that's where the rubber hits meets the road. That's what's so critically important for us right now.
Good. We have a couple questions from our online folks, if you don't mind. You mentioned that a mass scale disruptive event will happen. Is that a 100% probability?
I don't think anything's ever a 100%
Right, I know.
probability. But yeah, I mean, look, it's just, I think this is naturally where we start to see things going. We've seen the evolution of warfare. We've seen the evolution of something, our cyber threat landscape. We've seen the evolution of just the amount of infrastructure we have that is digitally interconnected at this point. I think the natural conclusion we have to come to is whether it is through a malicious cyber actor or it is through an IT event, again, like the examples I gave earlier, we are going to see mass disruptive events that will continue. And a lot of our critical infrastructure is the equivalent of crumbling roads and bridges around this country right now. So we've got to be able to make significant investments both on the infrastructure side and the security side to be able to limit the potential for that future poly crisis.
Okay. I'll do one more question online and go back to the audience. Oh, Lucian, you want to? Okay.
No, nothing from Lucian.
From CISA's perspective, which currently presents the greater systemic risk to critical infrastructure, traditional IT environments or operational technology environments? How do you see that balance changing over the next few years as OT and IT continue to converge?
I don't think it's necessarily about which one has the greater risk. I think in my mind it's about focusing on the consequence, and not that there's less consequence necessarily for trying to weigh things out directly and saying which one's more. I think if we start to look at our OT though, again, we as a society do not have psychological resilience to the disruptions that OT would present. We just don't. If we start telling people, I'm sorry, there's a big cyber incident going on, you're not going to have access to water. That is going to be immensely impactful, both on the technical side as well as on the psychological side. So I think for me, it's more about the focus on the consequence of those environments. Because again, all IT environments aren't created equal, just like all OT environments aren't created equal. So again, I think it's getting to what is the specific function that those assets present, and then being able to get a better picture of consequence based on that.
Okay, great. Lucian?
So first of all, Director Anderson, appreciate your time coming up here. Absolutely fantastic, and being candid and forthright with a whole range of questions. Obviously, you're focused on the mission, which I think is refreshing to see what we need to get done as a nation. We've been focused a lot on cyber, but you have a whole other realm of responsibilities to deal with physical security for infrastructure as well. We're going to talk tomorrow a little bit about the kinetic threat to the airports, particularly from drones. And I think we've had a wake-up call in the country, even on the military side, when you've got drones parked over, Barksdale Air Force Base for 4 days, shutting down a strategic base. What can we work with you on ultimately on the physical security side as far as technologies? I know we've got a task force that's been built up in DOW. Do you want to take advantage of that task force? I mean, what can we start looking for civilian, airfield, kinetic protection, particularly from drone threat?
Yeah, and thank you for the tee up. I didn't have to pay Lucian to do that. People do tend to think about CISA as, as cyber and cyber first, and there is an awful lot of cyber work that we do. But we also have a tremendous amount of physical security work that we do in emergency communications resiliency and working with statewide interoperability coordinators and everything from counter drone, counter UAS programs, which we've got a fantastic program manager sitting right there inside of our infrastructure security division named Mary. I'm sure she'd be happy to be plugged right in with that. Or we've got our Office of Bombing Prevention that's doing everything from security assessments in the lead up to FIFA and our work that we're doing, all of our regions, where we're seeing both the matches being played and we're seeing, these team base camp locations are all plugged in with federal coordination teams, where our team members are providing, again, not just cyber expertise, but they're providing a lot of that physical security and kinetic threat expertise as well. So near-term plug, which I'm sure absolutely nobody in this audience is tracking on, is that FAA notice of proposed rulemaking that's out there, and the feedback that they're looking for on flight restrictions regarding critical infrastructure and those designations. So if you have not taken the opportunity to providing input on that notice of proposed rulemaking right now while it's open for public comment, is fantastic to be able to make sure that our FAA colleagues hear from the broadest set of stakeholders possible as they look to formulate that approach in the future.
Okay, great. We have a question here.
So thank you very much for your openness and transparency, echoing the other gentleman's comments. So AI, moving very, very fast.
That's this close to getting out of here with that AI question.
You knew you were going to get one, right? What's the, first of all, critical infrastructure? Yes, no, maybe.
Is AI critical infrastructure? Is that your question?
Yes, no, maybe.
No. I think the things that go into it and make it work are probably critical infrastructure, like our communications infrastructure, the data centers. When we look at IT critical infrastructure, I think it is an output. I think it is something that is generated and derived from things that critical infrastructure support and provide, which maybe is a distinction without a difference, but in my mind, at least, it makes sense.
So no AI sector coming anytime soon.
Well, I don't know. We've got,
because the government seems to be poking around a lot day to day, hour to hour in AI. I just asking for a friend.
Yeah, I don't. It's
a couple of them actually. Claude and
yeah. Do I know that we'll see an AI sector? I don't know. Do I think that we're going to see a lot more coordination in a formalized way with Frontier Labs and others? Yes. And if you look at the National AI Action Plan, there's some specific tasking to DHS and CISA there for things like building up an AI ISAC and a couple of other things. So ISAC is not a sector coordinating council or a sector designation by any means, but it is a recognition that there is a community of people that we need to be interacting with in a very focused way on threats that are specific to that environment. Because I think it's how do we secure from adversarial AI? How do we secure our AI? And then it's how do we use AI to help secure ourselves? So it's like there's three different, very, very broad buckets that I'm sure people could argue about the degree of fidelity and detail, within each one of them. But I think there's several different lines of effort that are going to require a high degree of industry collaboration for us to be successful in any of them.
Okay, so now the new boss calls you up and says, you've got to pull an all-nighter. Everything got squared away on Capitol Hill. We've got some money. Boss wants you to come down to the White House tomorrow and give Nick's executive order. They're going to approve your executive order. What's that executive order look like?
Well, for me, again, it's going to be all about our ruthless prioritization on critical infrastructure. It's going to be about getting down to that asset level discussion of critical infrastructure protection and resilience. I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that are out there right now, and that, just to be honest, there's a ton of federal resources and federal programs that aren't just being fully taken advantage of today. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of grant dollars. I mean, just looking at grant dollars that go out the door from the federal government every single year, but it's all based on the perspective of, if I use like state and local cyber grant program as an example, a single state administrative agent that has a single perspective about what they're trying to do to best secure their state. And you start looking at some of the FEMA reports that come out every year, there's a big disconnect between like cyber and critical infrastructure resilience and where those dollars are actually flowing for overall, grant dollars. They're still flowing to things that are traditional all hazards approaches. Like I'm from South Carolina, South Carolina spends an awful lot of money on things like hurricane resilience. If I'm trying to look at it, yes, like that is a thing they need to continue to do. They also need to be able to make a shift towards cyber and critical infrastructure-based resilience more broadly. We're just not seeing that flow right now. So for me, if there's another magic executive order that's coming down, it's going to focus on how are we going to have that concerted effort just to where we can help clean up some of the lines on that critical infrastructure prioritization, because we're doing it right now. We've got a specific DOW focus group just on DCI, where we're working with DOW and we're working with our private sector owner-operator friends on some specific DCI pilots. Then we've also got a larger Homeland Defense working group that we stood up that's focusing on all those other elements that I mentioned as well. Broader national security, public health and safety, continuity of the economy, and the like. So that getting down to that prioritization and how are we driving, being able to pull all levers of national power in order to affect that change. That is Nick's magic executive order.
Thanks.
Okay, back here.
Hi, thank you so much for your talks. This is the second time in less than a week I'm listening to your talks, and it's very interesting. You talked about AI not being the most frontier focus for critical infrastructure. I've been following DARPA. They've been working on or funding a project called Orlando. Stands for Optimized Reinforcement Learning Agents for Network Defense Operations. Those are like the agents are basically being built for critical infrastructure, water treatment facilities and stuff. So do you think CISA could also be on those front lines of funding, promoting at least AI implementation for efficient security, network security, and cybersecurity, implementations at least?
I'm going to start making people wear special buttons when they've heard me within the last week, so I don't use my same examples all over again. So I think, I think CISA is doing that right now. So I mean, we are both using AI to be able to assist our critical infrastructure owner operator friends, and we are examining artificial intelligence risk and what that means for people as they're sort of implementing new builds within this environment. But I haven't heard of Orlando. That's a new one. That's a new one for me. I can't keep up with all these DARPA projects. DARPA has so many different offices. They're working on so many different things, and they're making a lot of progress really quickly. So yeah, I think we're happy to be plugged into any of them, because first and foremost, I don't want to waste time spending CISA dollars on something that somebody else is already building. And that's that Homeland Defense working group that I made reference to a moment ago. That's really what that's all about. That's about us looking at it and saying, yeah, I might be the telecommunications sector risk management agency, but I've got a friend over here in the interagency that has a much better relationship with this particular company that has these particular assets. We're going to defer and let them take the lead in that. It's really just all about who's best positioned, who has the right assets, and who has the right tools at their fingertips in order to be able to lead whatever segment of that engagement it is. But Orlando's a new one I'll have to look at.
Okay, maybe a couple more questions. I know we're going a little bit over, but, oh, is it you? I'm sorry. Okay.
Good afternoon, sir. It's a pleasure to talk to you this afternoon. So speaking to the scale and the likelihood of cyber threats in the future, do you see the Army and Air National Guards playing a bigger role when it comes to defending critical infrastructure on the civilian side?
Oh, yeah. I promise I was not paying people to sit in the audience and ask me cool questions. So since we're in Maryland, I'll use Maryland as an example. The director of the Joint Staff here in Maryland is general officer level role, has actually been a fantastic partner for us, and being able to have some of those conversations just as a single example. But in my mind, again, when we look at CISA is meant to be that national coordinator. So for us, it doesn't matter if I had 100,000 person CISA army at my disposal. We're never going to have the amount of resources to be able to respond to every cyber incident around the country. So for us, it's about being able to look at both our National Guard friends and what are the resources they can bring to the fight, and also starting to look at a lot of the cyber civil defense organizations are starting to spin up a lot of these like cyber clinics and such in local communities, and trying to get a good understanding of what can they bring into the fight, so that when we look across the board overall, we can look at it and say, it's a really bad day. Guess what? Cyber Command's not coming. Cyber Command is going to get tasked for national level tasking, and they're going to be off doing what they need to do to make sure that this country can project power and be able to respond back kinetically if needed. They're going to have some DOW level tasking. And we just have to be able to operate with that as a recognition that we need to be able to look across the board and say, here's our Cyber Command footprint of what's available. Here's our FBI CAT teams and what's available. Here are our CISA, teams, regionally and nationally, and what's available. And here are our local assets, even if it's volunteer-based, to be able to understand what's available and what can they actually do. What do they have the capacity and the capability to be able to deliver, so we can just link people up with the right resources to try to help achieve restoration as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, last one. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks very much for coming, Nick, today, and thanks for your leadership. So I'm the guy that goes every place and asks about routers. So the FCC has banned foreign routers because they're a national security risk. Rob Joyce has testified to Congress repeatedly about this risk of tens of millions of Trojan horses put into our factories and infrastructure. So rather than asking the same question, I have a different one. Shouldn't we consider routers to be critical infrastructure or networking gear?
No, I don't. I really don't think so. It's and again, this is where I'll get back to maybe distinction without a difference. But in my mind, that's a part. It's a really important part, but it's a part. It's a part. It's a part and it's a piece of equipment, just like PLCs are or anything else. I wouldn't turn around and say, well, we've seen very clearly, and CIS has put out this alerting saying that the Iranians were targeting internet accessible PLCs that were unsecured and open on the internet. PLCs should be critical infrastructure. Now, I still think we've got to be able to take that. Here's the function that's being performed. Here's the sector that's performing it, rather than looking at it and saying this individual piece, part, or manufactured piece of equipment is critical infrastructure itself. But it does mean that we need to be able to treat it like the important interconnected element that it is across many different sectors. And that means secure by design. That means greater visibility into the supply chain. That means greater awareness about the risk that is placed within the supply chain, in particular from adversarial aligned countries where we have that presence within our supply chain. And it means that generating additional owner operator education on how to best secure them and how to best use them.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's all of our time and a little bit over. So I want to thank you so much, Mr. Anderson, for your time and for these great questions. Okay. Okay, you know what? As we're kind of wrapping up I'm sorry there. I just wanted to share, we're going to be moving into our next block of breakout sessions, and they will be in the same 3 rooms, and the 3 sessions that are going on now, which will take us then to the end of the day when we do our town hall, followed by a networking happy hour, which I hope everyone's staying for. Again, also, please make sure everyone is taking routing through our expo room and seeing our vendors who are making today and tomorrow possible. They really have stepped up to be able to make this happen for us. So the next breakout sessions are Stealth Path is going to be in the airport area. We have Digital Global Systems, which is going to be right here in Hamilton. And then the Maryland Air National Guard will be in the Vaughn. That is the room that is right over here to my left across the hall. So go ahead and make your way to the breakout sessions. And again, for those who are online, there is that second virtual link that you can click on. I will put it again in the chat, but you can go on there and choose which breakout session within Zoom that you would like to join. Okay, so thank you. Okay, everyone, let's, if we can everyone gather in here, 4 o'clock here. We're going to get started on concluding the day. We have our town hall, get some great feedback from our sponsors, our attendees, our speakers. If we can have everybody just come on into the main hall, that would be great.
Ready? Do you want to introduce yourself as well? So we can, we'll walk the room. Do you have another microphone?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm George Franz. I'm currently cyber operations lead at Mantech, former U.S. Army officer, J3 at U.S. Cyber Command, Cyber National Mission Force. So a DOW background mostly. That's the work I've been doing. I was telling him I spent the last couple of years as an advisor in the Cyber Command headquarters advising Dernza and Cyber on primarily China-related strategy stuff, but also kind of Texas. So this has been a very eye-opening day. And I appreciate talking to Lucian. Again, he kind of narrowed my very focused on some very tangible. I was kind of looking high. He's brought me down to what you're trying to accomplish here, which is really some things you can do now, affect policy, affect decision. I'll be listening and looking for, again, I still have my Department of War hat on, so I'm thinking about I'll be thinking about ways, how can DOW at any level, state level, National Guard, exercise TTP information sharing? What more can DOW do to help at the level, the Tampa airport level? It may not be a lot, or it may be a lot, but I think there are things DOW can bring, the department can bring to information sharing, intelligence sharing, tactics, techniques, training. So that's kind of the lens I'm bringing to gather those notes as you all look at your very specialized areas that I'm coming to appreciate are super special. So
Yeah, so I think we actually touched upon that in the first session. So Dr. Jones-Heath talked about the successes that they've had just in the last year on the OT side of the house. And I've been channeling Daryl Hagley all day. For those of you who all know Daryl, he and I kind of co-hosted this last year. He really, Alexis, wanted to be here today. He got called away, and Dr. Jones-Heath actually confirmed that. He's on a range somewhere doing some Lord's work for the Department of War. But I think some of the accomplishments of Daryl and Dr. Jones-Heath are translatable in a tangible way to what airports can do. So I think one of the things we took away, Alexis, first of all, we need her slides if she's going to provide those, because we're going to want to build, an after action report, and particularly on the success stories from her slides, what can we translate into guidance to airports or in a policy update to FAA and TSA. So I took that personally as one of the takeaways from the very first discussion. Where can we take some of the success of the Air Force that is looking at airfield safety every day and trains that data into the civilian side. So appreciate that very much, George. What? No, her slides. Yeah, she has slides, believe it or not. And I don't want you to bring it up. I just want to make sure we have them. Okay, because she had a success slide, and I took a picture of it, but I want to make sure we focus on that a little bit. We don't have to now. She's gone. So, all right. So I want to get from the audience. I just know that was the first thing right out of the chute that I took out. What I would like to do is get from the audience what was the really big, between the eyes, tattooed message that you feel like we should want to really take from this day and capture in some type of guidance. Outstanding. First up.
Thank you. I'll say operational resiliency. In the telco and cybersecurity space, we talk about, having dual use technologies. If one network is down, we go to another network, right? But operationally at airports and in the perimeter, we need that operational resiliency. And that does mean failover. That does mean securing IT and OT type assets, being able to manage them, using spectrum monitoring as a tool, building the framework. But operational resiliency is a buzzword, but it hits home.
Yeah, and I think I'm trying to remember who brought it up that it might have been Director Anderson that said, look, the aviation sector is such a sensitive period. Something happens in aviation, it makes headlines within hours. When all of a sudden flights are delayed for whatever reason, even the CrowdStrike, the snafu there, that was a national incident where bags were lost for weeks. And I think, I mentioned there's not more an emotional event than when you lose your bags. Baggage handling is a big issue there. So I do think, yes, resiliency, we should focus in on what more can airports do to reduce impact of business operations. But if you remember, I also separated out safety from resiliency. So I think we definitely need to have a subset. What do we do to enhance passenger safety at the airport, and then ultimately airport resilience? That's kind of how I'm going to couch it when we do the writing. Anybody else? Appreciate that very much. Resiliency in the back.
So first, just some insider baseball. I'm an old retired CW4, and this guy was my senior rater at one point in time, so it's kind of nice to have him deliver me stuff for a change. It's kind of nice. It feels good. Thank you. Thank you, General. I'll give you an opinion that might be a little controversial and make you think less of me, but I'll stand by it. And it's a challenge that says, if you look holistically across all of the attack fabric on anything, zoning into airports, because that's the theme here, IT is OT, cyber is kinetic. And if you disagree with any of that, I'll just challenge you. Did you mine the copper yourself? Did you make the hardware yourself? There's supply chain stuff. There's everything like that. So as a takeaway, I will tell you, I think China smiles every time we say divide IT into OT.
I agree.
Start thinking more holistically. Over.
Yeah.
Thank you, General.
Yeah, look, we've been, EJ and I have been working the CISO circuit now for 5 years, particularly in certain sectors. When you tell a CISO or a CIA, look, you not doing your job could ultimately get somebody killed, they have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, there's okay, so fine, the email goes down, networks go down, but they've never thought about, okay, a cyber attack actually creating physical harm or turning into a kinetic effect or causing property damage. So you're right. We have to get the entire community, virtual community, focused on the fact that if we don't correct this, somebody's going to get hurt. And so I'm with you. Definitely, cyber is can be very easily a kinetic experience, and can be a kinetic catastrophe. I think that's what you and we should be focusing on, right? On the very first part, that we have to acknowledge that we're in a world where we're focused on passenger safety. There is a very real kinetic and potentially catastrophic effect from a cyber attack. Yeah, yeah. No, I thought Nick did a fantastic job with that. We're pilots on panels. That's amazing. Yeah, no, I need a microphone. Do we have another microphone? You only have two?
All right,
Okay.
I got it.
I'll tell you what.
If he's going to comment about where
Hey, EJ, can you help move microphones around? I'll pin up here.
Who needs? Oh, you got one? Yeah, I would just amplify that. I mean, the director amplified that, right? A really bad day is on the way. And whether it's going to be tomorrow or next month or next year, you got to believe he's pretty close to right. And so, the takeaway is, how do you shift that so that bad day isn't at an airport?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And look, and that's my concern. I think that's one of the things that Daryl and I looked at with Alexis prior to Defend the Airport One, is you've got a asset class here with airports that's uniquely targeted. I mean, you can do a lot of national damage. Obviously, 9/11 was executed through aviation. You can do a lot of national damage by threatening an airport to the point people don't feel safe, much more so than you can do in other infrastructure attacks. So I've always thought that this sector really needed to focus on, it's a target above and beyond all others, because you can really create a lot of national chaos and a national fear by even threatening, airline and passenger travel. So I agree 100%.
My other takeaway after listening to a lot of discussions around drones is, doesn't look like it's that hard. And as we're seeing in real time, the event that happened over the weekend, right, where the FBI and the Secret Service closed in on those 22, 23 guys.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't take a nation state.
No.
Right? It takes an Instagram or a, goofy social network and some crazy ideas and a couple grand, and you're on the cusp of, again, a national security emergency.
And by the way, it's already happened. We'll talk more tomorrow about the drone threat. But please, if anybody's interested, look up what happened at Barksdale Air Force Base in March of this year, March 9th of this year. Barksdale Air Force Base, one of the strategic bomber bases in our country. You would think secure, safe, 4 days of hovering drones for which they had to shut down flight line operations. They had to basically position in place, stay in place, and they had no idea where this drone threat came from, and it disappeared. Think about that. That if that had actually been an attack, can you imagine what our nation would be dealing with in the aftermath if we lost 15 B-52 bombers on a flight line because we weren't paying attention? So this is not fake. This is not theory.
Yeah, no. I mean,
this is
rewind the tape to the Ukraine incursion on the Soviet bombers.
on the Russian, Soviets a long time ago, but more recently the Russian bombers. Yeah, I would have called them Soviet too.
I'm an old guy.
No, I know, both you and I knew what you were talking about.
You knew what I was talking about. But I mean, again, a relatively quick, inexpensive, very hard to protect against.
Hey, we learned a lesson on the flight line in Pisab and Prince Sultan Air Base, not just 3 months ago, right? What the Iranians did to us, we lost a Sentry and a bunch of 135s. So it's real, it's happening.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what do we offer airports as rational, prudent opportunities to reduce the threat? Drone threats, particularly insidious. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. Matter of fact, if those of you want to stick around to the very bloody end, we'll be back here for a town hall tomorrow afternoon talking about the lessons learned from tomorrow to include the kinetic threat. Other takeaways that we need to make sure we capture.
Hey, good afternoon. For me, one of the big striking points this morning when we were talking about IT and OT was the resounding concurrence on the panel of asset management. And I think a lot about how IT was like back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and a bit of a Wild West, in the government and the DoD side. Now it's very regulated. Everyone knows where everything is, mostly. But the resounding concurrence that on the OT side, the discovery process of finding what's on that network is job one, and it's not anywhere near complete. And that's a huge vulnerability in my mind. Thank you.
So there are companies, I think, in the expo hall, but I know there are other companies out there. They specialize in identifying the assets that are on the network. So remember, I think we came away with 2 takeaways this morning. An airport authority or airport entity knowing the assets they have just on the compound, on the installation, but more importantly, knowing which ones are connected and how they're configured. So I think that asset management is like 3 different categories there. And not only how are they configured, how are they protected, how are their remote accesses protected, and how their passwords protected. So asset management and asset visibility, 100% agree with you, needs to start with there. We'll make sure that gets included in the letter we write to FAA and TSA. Who had the microphone next? There he is.
Yeah,
We'll work our way up.
Son, thanks. In regard to some other security activity I've been involved in, EMP is also a highly featured issue, especially if you think in terms of grenades against, a physical structure. You could shut down an airport with maybe 3 of them, depending on the capability. And the other idea is, something that's a high atmospheric release of an EMP. Really bad news.
Yeah,
especially with drones.
Yeah, look, I spent a lot of time in the first Trump White House working on the EMP-EO executive order. That's a tough issue because of the fact that you're potentially looking at trillions of dollars of investments to go ahead and build the Faraday cages, build the protections against EMP. My concern is, and this is what I used to tell the National Security Council, is the more money we put into that, we ultimately have to ask ourselves, what are we not protecting because we're protecting against that threat? So we have to balance that out. EMP, definitely a concern. I know I spent a lot of time thinking about it from an engineering perspective. We did put out, I thought, some prudent guidance. We'll see what this administration does to update that. But I argued, I'll just be honest with you, that let's invest as much as we think we can in EMP, But I'm definitely more concerned about a cyber threat and a drone threat when I'm having to assign priorities for resources.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned over the years, both working as an independent expert with the Canadian aviation community, but also as a pilot, is that what's very different, let's say, talking to some of the CISOs of airports, is that unlike in the corporate world or government world where you protect your IT or even OT infrastructure, right? If you're a CISO of an electrical company, you protect your IT and your OT correctly, and you've achieved 90 or 95% of the objective. In the case of the CISO or the cybersecurity department of an airport, you protect your infrastructure correctly, even your OT, your buildings, and you've achieved 20% of the mission. Why? Because airports are communities of are an ecosystem of 100 different companies providing different services, and a lot of these services are critical to operations. It goes from the de-icing company, the fuelers, the caterers, the security services, the firemen, and each of these systems are not necessarily connected. It's not something that you might have purview or control as a CISO, but each of these systems affect your operations. So I think that the federative nature, the community nature of the problem is something that we need to absorb and discuss more. And I think part of it is also maybe we need to start thinking of inviting these people to this forum. The problem is that they're typically very small companies, don't have a big IT department, and they have a different level of maturity than the airports or the airlines will have. So I think that's the very different part of the critical infrastructure of airports, or compared with other critical infrastructure, is the fact that you only control a very small portion of everything that's needed to operate from a cyber point of view. And these are all these third parties that are out there that are at very different levels of maturity, and that's part of the difficulty, right? How you wrangle those cats to come to a common standard or a common agreement. I think that's where the pain is.
Appreciate it. And Dr. Fernandez, you made a comment earlier on stage. If only we had maybe a university that has a strong aviation background, for which a professor coming into that program could inspire their students to want to potentially offer a solution they could bring to defend the airport 3.0 next year. Is that a potential? We just got to find who that professor might be that would be willing to engage their students at that fine institution and come back here with maybe some ideas we can work on together. Okay, all right. I won't put you on the spot there or anything like that, but we'll have to figure that out. Any other comments or questions here before we move on to happy hour? Yes.
Just one, and I haven't really sorted out how to ask it or state it, so I'll just stream of consciousness here. It's about AI. And I'm a proponent for emerging technologies and leaning forward, not leaning back. And I've heard a number of comments about AI today. There's the folks in the camp that say we shouldn't do anything with AI until we've got this stuff figured out yet. And then there's other folks who say we should use AI for everything and it's a magic elixir. But when I look at what happened in other industries, the mobile telecom networks in Africa didn't roll out wireline and then go to mobile. They jumped straight to mobility because that was the technology that was leapfrogging everything at that moment in time. I feel like there is a natural desire to not lean forward where there may be an opportunity here for us. And I would just encourage us all to look for areas that may not be safety related, but areas where if 12 risk analysts walked into your operations and you could deploy them, but they're virtual, would that be value? I don't know. But is there an opportunity to use AI for good? It's asymmetric, but I think it's asymmetric for the good guys. So how can we leverage that and strengthen it and not just push it away because it's different, and not allow our suppliers just to use it to do the same things they do today faster? Because I think we need to do different things. That just my thoughts on that.
Agreed. I think there was a comment today, and I would love to get some interest from the audience about, let's talk about AI for safety. I recently wrote an op-ed that ultimately made its way around the country about using AI to improve the military ATO, the air tasking order process. In other words, that we deconflict movement of aircraft, because we had two KC-135s crash into each other over Kuwait. We had three F-15Es go down to friendly fire from a Kuwaiti fighter. All those could have been resolved had we had a more active, proactive digital twin ATO. I even mentioned that I think, to me, one of the big initiatives in domestic flight safety is digital twinning the airspace and ground control. So we have AI working within a digital twin, aiding a controller on looking at the tracks that the AI has been trained to look at, and then raising the flag when you see potential anomalies or conflicts, or even intrusions. Because I think that's really, to me, where we have to ask ourselves, in an industry where air traffic controllers are becoming overwhelmed, where can twinning the known airspace and asking AI to do anomaly detection, where can that ultimately aid a controller, not replace the controller, aid the controller to make for a safer flight environment? So I think that's to me a tangible example of what you're suggesting, AI for good. I think we can find another half a dozen examples. Obviously, as well as everybody, been tracking some of the near hits or near misses. I mean, everybody says it's a near miss when it's a real hit, but some of the incidences on the ground of collisions, we can definitely find a way to use AI to make sure that doesn't happen. So I think I agree with 100%. Let's look for the examples where AI can be trained to ultimately help us create safer conditions. Uh-oh.
Yeah, my own input is
Oh, no, not uh-oh you. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. I was going uh-oh where the microphone was going after you, but go ahead.
Hopefully it's not a bad uh-oh.
No. I want to go. No, the other question. I was so sorry. Yeah.
also my own input is all about whether you're in IT or OT, conduct periodic vulnerability assessment. Because a lot of companies don't do that. They wait until when hackers adversely come into your network. You don't have to wait until you do that. Even though as an airport, I was talking to this gentleman not quite long there. What hacker do is like they stay in your network for 254 days and they'll be observing, sitting in that network for a long time.
Yeah.
But if you conduct periodic assessments of your network, you will know any port that is open. You will know if John Doe didn't use the same password over 4 times.
Yeah.
But most companies don't do that because they assume that, okay, my network is secure. And once you do that, you'll be able to do the patching immediately.
Yep.
Most organizations wait until something happens. We don't have to do that because China, Russia, Iran, let's keep mentioning all. As we are sitting right now, they are getting into every network. The most network they always target is the banking, education, the government. But in real time, because I do assessment, and I was telling the gentleman, like every 4 hours, I make sure I patch my system, my network every 4 hours because I do continuous assessments.
Yep.
Because I realized that the bad guys try to get into my network 528 times. So you can imagine someone that's not in that industry and doesn't even care about what we do. So whether you are IT or OT, do conduct periodic assessments. That will help your company. Thank you.
All right. So this is the first day, I think, on the panels I've had for years where someone did not get on stage and foot stomp. If you just fix your passwords and implement multi-factor authentication, you reduce 90% of your cyber vulnerabilities. So it took to the end of the day. Thank you. I need to get your name and number because you're going to be on a panel next year to talk about that. All right. To be able to emphasize that. All right. But yes, obviously, password management, password protection, adequate patches, and then I would say MFA. And then the last thing is knowing your remote access at points and being able to protect those. So now you brought up, while you were talking, there was another issue that I thought about that we did not raise today. And that is, while we're focusing on the airport and the systems that run the airport, the automated systems, we didn't necessarily talk about the threat that's either brought in by a passenger that wants to get into the network and conduct a nefarious activity, nor did we talk about the owner stack. What does the airport bring in for its own technology that may create a risk? You know, I keep going back to an example I've been using for years, which was the aquarium thermometer in the lobby of a casino that nobody had any idea could be a vulnerability, and it turns out it created a huge problem. So I think when we put our guidance letter, it's not just asking airports to look at their inventory and what they have as far as safety protocols for the systems that are operating the airport, but also what is being brought in, the monitors, the other technologies, as well as where there might be a passenger-induced threat. So we'll have to cover that a little more detail in our recommendations. But thank you so much for that comment. What do you think, George? Are we covering the landscape here? Is there anything that you picked up on today that you want to focus? And one more question. I want to talk to you too as well. I want to get your recommendations.
You did task me with
I did,
making a
Rachel.
comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I wanted to follow on the controversial opinions piece of this, and I would only be a millennial if I can count. So 6 things I thought today that were a little controversial. AI is not critical infrastructure. It is an asset to track, right? Whether you're a user or insider threat, but it is something that's a little different. We don't know what we don't know, right? We talked about invisible assets, shadow AI, shadow IT, all those things that we just don't know, we can't see. Priorities should be consequence driven versus your typical risk or compliance driven nature of things. The 4th is we need to have some uncomfortable disruption as a public in order to be resilient and be able to deal with some of the shenanigans that will be coming our way.
That last one hurts, but go ahead.
It does. 5, we can't lose critical thinking awareness. There was one comment that came up a couple different times about complexity versus complexity of
Well, we know who
systems.
said that. She said.
I know, pretty good, pretty good. But then last but not least, the 6th one, we need to keep our workforce trained, young and old, not just with tools to replace our specialties.
Well, we know who said that too, so, all right. Hey, I want to, only because I've known Nick for years. I think I know the distinction he was making about AI is not an infrastructure sector. Look, water is essential to us, but water is not the sector. The wastewater and the water distribution systems are a critical sector. Electricity is not a sector, but the systems that provide electricity. Now, there was a question asked, should a router be critical infrastructure? I agree with Nick. You know, the electrical lines in our house is not critical infrastructure. It's the distribution that gets it to the house. Now, when we start looking at AI, I do believe that he's probably going to take a look at the digital infrastructure sector that's emerging. That's unique and different from communications and unique and different from broadband. But the digital infrastructure sector, I think at some point, as it contributes to our economy and our way of life and our national security, most likely will emerge as a unique and separate infrastructure sector from the 16 we have. We did look at one point in the last few years, I say we, the government, space as another infrastructure sector, and election security, election systems. So I think we're going to probably need to do an updated PBD. And I think Nick probably will look at, or CISA, look at digital infrastructure separate from AI. So I think it was the way the question was worded. But I think I knew where Nick was going on the answer on that one. So, all right, microphone, anybody? All right, Doctor, go ahead.
So not to sound too redundant, but we have all agreed that we are dealing in a systems environment. And so it is important to understand your problem space and what sort of system you are operating with in your problem space, so that you can apply the correct tools. And by tools, I'm not talking about firewalls, IDSs, things like that. I'm talking about the models that you actually use, deploy to help you solve your problem. And of course, share that information with junior staff.
Okay, so you just keyed on a key takeaway. There are models and frameworks out there. Question is, are they usable to an airport engineer or an airport team? And or how can they be adjusted? So that's the one takeaway I took. I don't know if you remember on the, not your panel, but the panel before, I basically stunned the MITRE, Mario, saying, hey, help us with your framework. So I think I took that as a takeaway. What can we do for models and frameworks that are out there that will be useful at the airport level? Or how do we modify existing frameworks, EJ, on making frameworks that exist, like the ones in my nonprofit, BCS, right behind there in that banner? How do we also make it applicable to the airfield and airport sector? So I think I took away that as well. How do we, you're right, I'm not going to use the word dumb down, but how do we ultimately make the complexity less complex and more actionable? So I think that's what we need to work on. Yep, exactly right. Okay, what do you think, Alexis? Was this a good first day? All right, any last comments from anybody? Yeah, as you know, both my panels, I was giving big thoughts, lightning round. Nobody's got any more big thoughts. Okay, all right.
right.
We're back here tomorrow morning. What time?
Yeah, same time, breakfast between 7:30 and 8:30. Wait, we have a question?
We have a.
Oh.
Okay, oh,
Last
good.
big thought.
Jose?
Committing them.
Oh,
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see that.
I'm gonna add the controversial comment number 7. My thoughts, my takeaway from this is that ultimately the problem is not about cyber. Ultimately, the problem is about systems of systems, of which many of them are cyber. And I will put my professor hat. One of the first things I need to do when I get there at Embry-Riddle is to start thinking of exactly that, modeling the systems, because we can do cybersecurity all day long, but if we don't understand how the systems interact and how they affect operations, we're wasting our time.
All right, actually, I'm going to call an audible. We're not leaving until somebody who has not spoken at all today says something. All right, and I'm going to look Jay in the back there. She has not said anything all day, but she's been taking notes. So you get the final word today. And first you have to announce who you are and where you're coming from. But you get the final word today before we break for today.
Wow, no pressure. Hi, Jake Harrigan. If I haven't met you yet, I'm with TSA. I will be on one of the panels tomorrow, so I look forward to talking a little bit more about threat and risk and mitigation, both kinetic and cyber. So just a pleasure to be here actually today and to listen to all the discussion. I think I've learned a lot in the kind of the maturation process that we've all gone through when it comes to, evolving cybersecurity, figuring out this thing between IT and OT, and really focusing on how we build partnerships across the public and private industry to develop solutions that really matter, protecting our critical infrastructure, and really being ready for the conflict that we know is coming and ahead. So thank you all so much. I'll see you tomorrow.
All right, so if there ever was a reason for everybody in this room to come back tomorrow,
Right.
make sure they're here tomorrow.
That's right.
I will be in the front row because I want to hear what Jay has to say on our panel. So anyway, thank you for a great day. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody back here tomorrow morning. And for more, we're going to do another town hall at the end of the day. So we'll have more opportunity here to be able to capture some lessons learned. Thank you very much. And that's all. Head to the happy hour.
Great.